good morning again. It's January 27th. It appears still a lot of people are confounded about my comments. Nobody understands where I'm coming from. I get it. I get it. Here's the deal. I guess what we have to do is just take a look at the truth here. And then when we maybe take a look at the truth, everybody can understand it a little better. So let's just get to the point. I'm going to try and do this. I pulled up a couple sites so I can kind of make my point with. So here's the deal. When everybody was in Washington, D.C., and the electoral votes are being counted, everyone had assumed that it was probably going to take, Pence was probably going to hand this off to the Senate for a re-election because the nation was too divided. That would have been what was considered to be the appropriate thing to do, being there was just so much uncertainty in the election and the nation was really literally divided, like 80 million people were not agreeing with the outcome. That didn't happen. But then what happened afterward is what upsets me. Afterward, video of our president, then at the time Donald Trump, showed a panicked president. Now, things since this happening kind of really made me angry. Just made me angry, and very disappointed in Donald Trump, because Donald Trump appeared to have caved and cowered to the Democrats and the criminals of both Democrat and Republican establishments in this country, literally overthrowing this nation from within is what they're doing. And that's what they've succeeded in doing. And since then, and even now, and the reason of it is because we have a majority of ignorant society in America that no longer know their place as Americans. People don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand the Declaration of Independence. They don't know the history of the founding of our nation. They have literally been dumbed down. And who's behind this? The government. Is it Democrat or Republican? It's both. It's a corrupt establishment right now, top to bottom, from federal down to state, county, and city government, across the nation, within all political establishments. It is corrupt, and it's been getting worse and worse for the last 50 years. And it has reached a point now that it's a total threat to the true Republic of the United States, which right now, really, in truth, doesn't even exist anymore, because right now, we're a banana republic. And the reason we're a banana republic is because of Donald Trump. And that's why I'm angry. You see, in 2016, we were able to, as the people, defeat any corruption within the elections and put in the person we believed we wanted. We were able to place Donald Trump as the President of the United States in spite of all the widespread corruption within this government across the nation. We were able to place him. We were a true republic then. We still had the say and the power as the people. Right now, we don't. And the reason we don't have that is because Donald Trump himself cowered down, submitted, and handed this nation over to the very criminals we elected him to remove. Of both Democrats and Republican rhinos. And rhinos, I mean, just this whole government. There is no Democrat Republican anymore. What there is an elitist society. And this elitist society I've been watching for the last 50 years grow into what it is. It's a society of that of government employed, appointed, and elected. It's a society unto itself and of an elitist status over that of the common people. Something that should not be allowed and should have never been allowed to evolve into this nation. Because under our Declaration of Independence, we declared the right to be separate from such an elitist status. But this is what we have. This is something that's become self-evident even to many of those involved in it, of those of new. I have a lot of LEO who are customers of mine that I speak to, and it's sad to say that in the last 10 years, many of them have left their law enforcement positions because of the upset of what's going on. And they agree that there is a developing society of class between government and common people. And that in that class of government, you have the elbows being rubbed between judges, state attorneys, commissioners, governors, representatives, higher up in law enforcement, sheriffs, all elected government and appointed kind of position, judges. They're in their own elite society, and where they themselves are the ones who control everything, and they're and they just go along with the system. They don't care. They really don't care. Today, the sad part is that we fell into what would be called the Wizard of Oz. You see, there was many books I read about the threats of these when we go back to the 50s and we look at the concerns of the people back in that time about this happening. I reference things, some people say it's offensive when I say paper brain idiots. And what a paper-brained idiot to me is somebody who is indoctrinated through education to believe a truth that the facts, if looked into, show that's not the truth. And this is a method which we hear right now strongly been pushed for the last 4 years, 6 years, 8 years actually by the Democrats, of they choose truth over facts. And this is what I'm talking about. You see, if the government can spin a narrative with the media onto the public, and as the public all of a sudden assumes because it's on the news, like Nancy Pelosi even said, the wrap-up smear. If it's on the news and the politicians that we entrust are saying it, it must be true. But is that the truth? No. When you look at the facts, you find out politicians, news, media, all are lying to us and have been lying to us. And it's getting to a point right now, it's just gross. It's disgustingly gross. But to the point of my issues with Donald Trump was, the thing what is afterward, we've seen unprecedented events in this nation. One of the unprecedented events was that for the first time in American history, the capital of the United States was fortified and surrounded by that of our own National Guard and military, who took position and were vetted to see if they would fire and shoot and kill Americans on our own capital grounds. That's unprecedented in this country. And the person who ordered that was Donald Trump. The man who has for 4 years telling us he is going in there to remove the corrupt criminal establishment. In the end, cowers down and orders that of our military and our National Guard to protect the very corrupt criminal establishment that he was in there to remove. And he issues the order and fortifies Washington to allow them to be protected in their stealing of our nation and the destruction and crushing the foundation of our republic and leaving us where we are right now as a banana republic. This is the reality of the facts, people. You can't deny the facts. Donald Trump, after quickly, he quickly gave up on the fight. He claimed he had the evidence, which he did. And, when you look at the records between Obama's transition over to Trump, and I'm talking about like with the campaign things, the lock her up, this, that, and everything, you realize that Obama had issued pardons for everybody under his administration. So under the laws of double jeopardy, no one could be charged in anything with Donald Trump. He could only rely on that of new crimes being committed. Of which, in truth, the sad part is most of what this government has done in the 4 years of Donald Trump was done under the actual right of law of the Constitution, of which we consent to this government to have as its powers. We, the people, consent to this. And they did everything as these, slick-talking tongue attorneys, and by their motions in paper, because that's all these people do, really. They just push paper and they ramble on until people totally lose concentration on what the hell they're even talking about. Okay? And it's disgusting what we see right now. But the other sad thing is when you look back and you're somebody like me and you've been studying the history for a long time, you realize the plot and the plan, okay? And it's been going on, like I say, this has actually been going on since the Civil War ended. It's been a pursuit of a divisive nature between political parties in this nation since the end of the Civil War and even prior. The Democratic Party itself was founded in 1828 as like an opposition party to the United States of America. It was a party formed by the British Tories who were loyal to Great Britain and wanted to overthrow this country and destroy the centralized developing government of the Free Republic of the Constitution of the United States. They didn't favor it and want it in any way, shape, or form. And they formed that political party as an attempt to coup the United States of America, in which in 1861 with the Civil War they actually attempted to do that. They attempted to overthrow the country. Since they lost the Civil War, they haven't stopped that attempt. And now we look back to 160 years ago, and people today are so ignorant in this country. Americans are so blind to the reality, and it's amazing because you know what? As a kid, I shined shoes. And I can remember speaking with people from the 30s, the 40s, people from the 20s that lived through the Depression and what have you. These people were so smart when you spoke with them. Okay, they knew about the truth of what took place in the Civil War. They understood the lead up to the Civil War. People knew about the facts of why you didn't like unions in this country. A matter of fact, being in New York City, many of them, even with the cops, like I say, I get people today that are so ignorant. I know people that say to me, oh, that's not true. You're making that. No, I'm not. Dino was a common name for Republicans who became Democrats because they were looking and seeking union jobs. And the unions were supported by the Democrats. And if you wanted to get into a union position, you had to be a Democrat. So many Republicans, just for the purpose of getting a job, became Democrats. And what the Democrats themselves, they knew, like we call a rhino, who's a Democrat in the Republican Party, they would refer to many of the police officers and firemen of New York City who would join unions and become Democrats as Dino. They would get the nickname Dino. And there was many New York cops who were called Dino. And you knew if a cop had the nickname Dino, he was really a Republican, not a Democrat. This is the way it was back then. That's the way it was in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., everywhere. And this was why, because, people were aware back then. And, I learned of these things as a kid, and I can remember them, and then people would say to me about that. It would be people who led me to the understanding of things I would study to understand my nation as a little kid. They would tell me about in the 1870s with the Knights Labor Union, which was a labor union formed by the Ku Klux Klan. People knew about the onslaught and slaughter of what took place in the early 1900s and 1915 with Woodrow Wilson. And there was people who remembered living through that slaughter. They remembered it. They seen it, witnessed it with their own eyes. And I can remember them telling me that, today in the history, they hide these things. They're buried. And many people were upset about the way that the government itself was being complicit, both of Republican and Democrat, in restructuring the entire history of our nation in a way where it kind of masked what was really going on up until the point of the current times. They were upset about it. People talked about how Woodrow Wilson, which, this is the truth. Like, you look at the events happening today with the monuments all being taken down, right? This is so idiotic to show you how ignorant this nation is. The majority of people who were protesting against the Confederate monuments were Democrats. Most of them were blaming Republicans for the Confederacy monuments and historical references of all these monuments and kind of, what could you say, places put up in remembrance of their history of the Confederacy. And what the Democrats who were complaining about apparently are too ignorant to understand is that the Confederacy of the Confederate slave states was actually founded, created, and established by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was the pro-slavery party, okay? And they formed this Democratic Party in an attempt to develop a political establishment to overthrow the nation. They were the Confederacy. And it was in 1915, Woodrow Wilson was the guy who enacted the Parks and Recreational, I don't know what you call it. He was the guy. He implemented the Parks and Recreations Department. And he was the guy who started putting up all these Confederate monuments because Woodrow Wilson was actually a Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. This guy is known to be a Grand Wizard. There's files of fact that prove that he was a Ku Klux Klan member and a Grand Wizard because he certified the Quran of the Ku Klux Klan's new revised book in 1915. He showed the birth of the nation in the White House, which revived the Ku Klux Klan. It was him who allowed for the Klan to go on an onslaught across this country. After he enacted was, I just want to check something real quick so I make sure I don't get this wrong, because I notice if I say one thing that's not correct or a word that's not correct or I misstate something by a little bit, people all of a sudden assume they want to jump all over to everything I know is wrong. So I just want to say, let me just check something real quick so I make sure I'm right about what I'm thinking here. Okay, I did want to mess up here. Woodrow Wilson had enacted in 1915 what was known as the Sedation Act, and this was in relation to World War I. I just wanted to make sure I said that word right. Okay, Sedation Act. Okay, and what it was that the Sedation Act would make it where you couldn't speak out against the government in any negative way. Reporters couldn't report against the government in any negative way. And what he did was, the reason how he did this was in relation to our involvement as assisting our allies in World War I and with World War I going on. But in truth, this was the Democrats' plan to mask the onslaught across this country that would take place on that of the black American communities developing and that of the white Republicans in support of them. Tens of thousands of blacks were slaughtered, murdered across this country in many prospering black communities, and as well thousands of white Republicans were as well slaughtered, murdered, and burned out of their homes and ran out of their communities by the Ku Klux Klan, which incited fear through terrorism across this nation from 1915 to 1921. Some people like to say, you know, Jim, again, you're back, way back there. What does that have to do with today? You know, I keep trying to explain to people that you have to understand the methods and the practice of that of this government and the practice of world totalitarian governments does not fade with 100 years. Well, like I said, if you look at Arabia, the royal family of Arabia, the very people who right now control Arabia, this very day, their family name goes back like 7,000 years. When you're looking at Egypt, the very same royal, established, elitist dictators, their names go back 9,000 years. When you're looking at China, India, you can date these things back 13,000 years. One of the youngest, aside from us, the United States of America, would be the Islamic totalitarian regimes of Islam. They date back 1,400 years. We are 244 years new. Our country has been at war with the world, attempting to destroy it for all of its 244 years. Okay, this is a fact within history. That's a progression throughout all of our time. All of our time. In the very wars of recent time, with the very same people as well. And today, because of ignorance of the American people, we have allowed this government is an ignorant government of total educated idiot fools. So quick and affirmative action has damaged our position in government and society to a level that has dumbed this nation down to be a true threat to its own establishment. The American people right now are so ignorant to the reality of what's going on and that of their place as Americans and that of our history, our government form, and the laws of our nation that they are a threat to them very selves. And this is what I'm saying. I don't understand. But Donald Trump, like I say, back to why I'm upset. Donald Trump's the one who ordered for the National Guard to fortify Washington, D.C., protect that of what he claimed was the criminal, corrupt establishment that was attempting to overthrow our nation from within, which clearly now, by his actions, he's aiding and assisting them in doing it. He's protecting them in doing it. And he's doing it in such a way, it's unprecedented in the history of this nation. He ordered that of our own National Guard and military to take arms against the American people to protect that of what he claimed was the criminal, corrupt establishment attempting to coup the American people's authority in their own nation. This is just disgraceful to me. And nobody sees this. Nobody wants to recognize the truth of what took place here. Donald Trump failed. Donald Trump cowered down. Donald Trump handed this nation over to the very people he claimed for 4 years he was in there to remove. And he did it, protecting them in their position to do it. Now, I understand a lot of people want to think Donald Trump is still in power. I understand a lot of people want to think he's going to do something. But I'm going to tell you right now, some of the things that if you went back in my history on Facebook, you would see. You know, I supported him loyally for 4 years. There's no doubt about that. There was even a point where I had mentioned maybe that he had reached, Mike Pence. And that Mike Pence might actually have found humanity in himself. Because if you go back to the night when he picked Mike Pence, you can see my long rant to almost 12 o'clock in the morning about the fear I had about him picking Mike Pence as vice president, because I knew Mike Pence was a goddamn rhino because he was a former Democrat. And early studies of Mike Pence showed that there was claims of him being a Ku Klux Klan member when he was a Democrat in Indiana. So, I mean, I ranted all about this till 1 o'clock in the morning on the night that Trump picked this guy. And I had great concern about this. And then also, too, there's points where you look, like I say, I care about the truth. I'll support anybody, and nobody's perfect. I get that. And Donald Trump clearly was not a perfect man. Some of the things of what really raised red flags with me was I remember the time when Donald Trump said that he preferred to lock people up and then later do due process of law. That's not how this country works. I understood that, and I think most people did as well. And I believe possibly his one sister, who was a federal federal judge may have had some kind of conversation with him about that, from what I seen afterward, of which then he changed his direction on it and understood that, you know, the American people wouldn't tolerate being locked up without due process of law, or having it later after being detained. That's just, it was idiocy. I mean, there would be a point to do that if you had something like where you enacted the Insurrection Act, or you did something where you couped the nation and you have to suspend the Constitution for a period of time, like what Lincoln had to do during the Civil War. Then in those cases I can understand it, but was not the case. And these things raised great concern, and they showed that though Donald Trump was a very intelligent man, an incredibly smart man, and an incredible businessman with great skill, he obviously lacked some of that genius and common sense that out of what the founding principles of the laws of this nation were, when you consider those statements back then. This is just self-evident. You know, it's just self-evident common sense. But like I say, it was Donald Trump who then afterward, he came out and condemned his base. You know, granted, I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding. The Patriots that went into the White House, was my understanding back when I was there, the people were saying they wanted to get in and confront Congress. They weren't happy with, they wanted to confront the government. They wanted to have their piece and their say in the floor. They wanted to go in there and say what they had to say. That's what people wanted to get in there and do. After they realized that Congress was evacuated, is my understanding, people exited, which was true. I was outside. I said everybody came right back out. When there was many people saying Congress is no longer in there, they evacuate them. There's no use going as nobody's in there. But we understand that after everybody had left, that you had a group of people of different groups, like now videos emerged that show that there was groups in there that was disguising themselves as Trump supporters who were Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Those people lingered in there and made fools of themselves and did a lot of damage. There was people going through offices, stealing things and what have you. Those things were wrong. That should have never happened. That was not anybody's intent, I don't believe, for that to happen. I understood that afterward, the majority of the people there, which was a sea of veteran hats. There was a sea of Marine veterans, Vietnam veterans, Army veterans, Air Force veterans. I mean, all that day, all I seen was a sea of veteran hats. So these were the men and women who have been defending this nation. For the majority of that crowd out there was the men and women who have been defending this nation for all of their lives. They were the people who put their lives really at the line. They were more patriotic and a true American than anyone there, because these were people who signed their life away in a dotted line to defend the Constitution and defend the republic of this nation. And they were the veterans, and they were the people who fought for this nation and defended it. There was a lot of people up there, patriotic, just everyday Americans that never signed that paper, as well, just as patriotic and loving of their country and wise to that of the laws of this nation. Donald Trump pretty much turned on all of his base. He went from the guy who was going to correct this nation's flaws and fix the corrupt establishment to the guy who now was using that of our own military, our own National Guard, to protect the very criminal, corrupt element of which he went in there to remove and fortify them and allow them and help and aid and assist them in taking control of our nation, turning us from that of a true republic to a banana republic. And I don't care what anybody says. That's what happened. That's what happened. That's the reality we are now facing. And right now, all Donald Trump is trying to do, of which the records are starting to show with tax season and what have you coming up, and what's being reported right now is you see his son, Donald Trump Jr., pumping away for books on his website, pumping away trying to pluck the strings of Trump supporters about the history of the 4 years to try and make it appear as though, you know, everything is still on track and some kind of fantasy delusional thing is going to happen. Which I'm sorry, people, it's not. And we have a lot of serious questions. We can't get lost here and divided. We have to stay focused, because you know what? I'm going to tell you right now, we are on the teetering of losing our nation. And the world is watching. And the world enemies are watching us. And I can tell you right now, if we continue on the path we're continuing, we're going to be what we're going to see happen in America, what happened in Iran in 1978, if we don't wake up and stop the idiocy right now that we're moving forward. Look, you know, I'm very upset with Donald Trump. I'm very angry about what happened, but it's pretty clear we picked the wrong man. We have to move on from that right now and deal with what we have to deal with. And what we have to deal with right now is the direct threat to our nation. When you understand the difference of what could have happened and what should have happened and what did happen. Okay, Abraham Lincoln in 1861 faced the very same situation as what Donald Trump did. There was threats against Lincoln. There was threats against the Republic. The Democrats were trying to overthrow the Republic of the United States in 1861. They formed their own government, their own Congress, their own Senate. They established their own military. They elected their own president, Jefferson Davis. It was the first time in American history there existed 2 presidents, 2 administrations, 2 vice presidents, 2 Congress, 2 Senates, and 2 militaries. It was in 1861 when the nation became that divided. And in that time, Lincoln had to suspend the Constitution. He had to do what he had to do to save the Republic as the president. And Trump had that same option, and he failed. He didn't do it. He had that same option. He could have couped the nation with the military, and he could have ripped down this government and restructured it in such a way and eliminated all the corruption, but he didn't have the balls to do it. He was a coward. He walked away and he handed the nation to them. And he walked away and handed it to them in the greatest act of abuse ever in the history of this nation. Because no president ever in the history of this nation has attempted to fortify the capital of this nation with that of our own military and vet them to go ahead to see if they would actually shoot American people should the people want to exercise their authority and rights as they reserve unto themselves as the authority over this entrusted government to alter, amend, or abolish the government. Trump aided and assisted the Democrats in preventing that from happening. He literally cooped the people with them, protected them by his authority as the president, all the way up to the point of the handing over of power. That's a fact you all have to wake up to and see. The problem, like I said now, is that's the reality. Everybody's still focused on Donald Trump and this delusional thought that Donald Trump is still in control. He's not in control of our military. Trust me right now. I can tell you that right now. Our military of higher officials right now are confounded because they're just as ignorant as the majority of Americans. They don't know what to do. Because that's the other option we could be facing right now. Donald Trump failed, but our military still has the power to coup the nation. They have the power to coup this government in the face of long sustained corruption and abuse, of which is self-evident. But I don't think they understand neither. And then, and two, in some senses, what's legally being discussed right now by paper-brain idiot attorneys who just don't seem to have the common sense to understand that our founding fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution in very plain English, very clear understanding. Ignorance of the law has been stated since this nation was founded is no excuse. And the law had to be written in such a way that any common sense, reasonable man could read it and understand it and comprehend it. You know, these lawyers today and people, they speak as if they are so educated and so wise. And I've known many good lawyers who are humble. And they say that they'll tell you to themselves, you know, it's not really all that complicated. It's not made out to what. They do this because of an elitist status. People have to have a self-indulgence of there's something they're really not. You know, some kind of supreme power or elitism is what goes on with these attorneys and that of government. They want to have elitism. They can't accept being that of just a common person with the people, of which was intended for all government and all established in this nation to be. The threat we're faced right now is that elitist status is literally turned us into a banana republic. They did this by the law we consented to them, and that's what they keep threatening and stating and exercising right now as they go about their debates, that they're doing everything by the law of the Constitution, and that's true. These are the consented to powers we gave them through the Constitution, and they have legislated us out of the process of the Constitution, and they have legislated themselves into an untouchable realm of existence as the authority within this government. But that's not true either. You see, they talk about the law that we consented to them of the government, but they refuse to talk about the national law. You see, the law of the Constitution is the law of the land. The national law is the law of the nation. And who is the head authority of the national law? The people who established it, we the people. The Declaration of Independence is the establishing law of the nation. And the authority of that law is the people. And we never gave up that authority. Matter of fact, we state very clear in that authority that even if we consent to that of a government, that the consenting to the government would be governed over that of the governed. The governed would be that of the consenting power given to those to govern. If you understand, that's what it says. Like here, let me see, I can pull it up. Here's the Declaration of Independence. Maybe if I'll read this and I'll try and explain it how I understand it in my common sense reasoning to it. And if anybody wants to talk about it and says I'm wrong, well, let's have that debate. Okay? It says here, liberty and pursuit of happiness, okay, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. You see that? deriving their, right here, right here, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. So that means that the just power is being consented to a government as what we declare in the law of this nation and its establishment would be given to that government by the consent of the governed, the people. Meaning that we would be the ones who say what they can and cannot do. They would not be a self-authoritarian government and where they decide their own powers and authority. We, the people, would be the deciding of what they can and can't do. Now, the Declaration of Independence was the law of the nation's establishment, which even consents to that of a government being, of which consented to that of the Constitution even being. The Constitution is secondary to the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence establishes the right for a Constitution to even be. And then our founders took 10 years to draft that Constitution. And even at the end of it, we know, if anybody actually studied history, even to the point of ratifying it in 1789, we had forgot a Bill of Rights. And it was Thomas Jefferson who recognized we forgot the Bill of Rights. And we had the amendments, the first 10 amendments put in for the Bill of Rights. Okay, and that was Thomas Jefferson, because we realized that we had to protect ourselves and our own interests to ensure that we maintained our authority. Now, within the rights of the amendments, this is what people got to understand, is in the rights of the amendments, there was only one amendment right that had a specific clause that it should not be infringed. There's only one, the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment had, because we knew in the Revolutionary War, that, you know, one of the things that you can't win a war unarmed. You can't win a war with sticks and stones. You can't just do it. When you have a military power coming in against you, if you don't have equal force to match that power, you're going to be slaughtered. And that was what the British tried to do to the patriots of America in the Revolutionary War. They tried to obstruct them from having gunpowder or arms to be able to fight. So we established that Second Amendment very clearly, and I guess, you know, just to make sure everybody understands, we're going to go and take a look at what, because I'm going to do this where, you know, I don't want people saying, you know, you didn't say this word or you missed that word, okay? Most of what I say is out of memory and amendment. Most of you who raise these questions, if you're so certain of yourself, you should be able to understand that as well. I guess you would know it, right? You wouldn't be questioning it. But it appears your own questioning shows your own ignorance in it because you don't know it. That's all I'm saying, you know. But we look at the Second Amendment. It says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. What does that tell you? To me, as a common sense person, that tells me that we as the people need to be well-regulated, established, and proficient with weapons and military tactics to defend our freedom. That's pretty clear what it says. Matter of fact, if you were to go back and look at the notes, that's exactly what it says. That's exactly what it says. That's exactly what our founders meant, was that their intent was to have a national armed nation of militia, that all American people would be born a militia. And they knew, because they knew that a nationally armed nation of militia is what the world feared. We would become the largest armed military nation in the world by our militia. Now, you know, as time went on and progressed in our short little 244-year history, today, people assume as if the government is some kind of power unto itself, and that the government has established everything of which we now see in our nation, which is not true. Everything that's in the establishment of our nation starts with the people. And then there's consented authority for the government to enact departments to regulate and or administer and or make rules for these things that the people established. Like the military. The militia is the military of our nation. It was the militia who founded this nation, the people. The military of which we know today within its branches of the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and now Space Force. These are extended branches of the militia, the home-based militia. They're extended branches that go abroad to meet the enemies on their own ground to prevent them from coming to our ground. You understand? They were extended branches of the home militia. Everyone in the military, as you can see, like people think that the military is some kind of government-controlled entity. It's not. You know, common sense here, people, and we need to learn our place as the people, and we need to learn the true law and establishment of our country, and we need to face the reality of what it is and take our place as that authority of the people. Understand this. Everybody in government of any policing or military authority is required by the Constitution to take an oath to the Constitution. The first three words of that Constitution establishes the authority over those branches. We the people. You see, the Constitution starts with those three words, we the people. Because in the continuation of the Declaration of Independence, which establishes our authority over the government, would establish that by the consenting authorities we're giving and powers we're giving to the government we're consenting to. Who the authority of consent is. The first three words establish that. We the people. We are a self-governing nation of people. Our government is for the people, by the people, of the people. Now the problem that we have is that in the establishment by our founders, they never assumed the possibility that we would have enemies within our own nation attempting to overthrow us by positions within our own government. But this is what we're facing right now. You see, we knew at the time that we had the Tory, okay, when we established the Constitution, but we didn't know that eventually the Tory would develop their own political party and attempt to overthrow the nation in a civil war. We didn't know that they would be retained afterward to be able to continue on as their own political establishment in this country, which would keep us divided all the way to this very day. We did not understand or foresee the possibility of an entity of a different government establishment which was opposed to that of the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America, and in a pursuit to overthrow this nation and hand it off to that of foreign interests of which they were allied to. We didn't foresee this happening, but it's what happened. It's what happened. And right now we're facing that very threat of what the reality of this is. We have an enemy within that is attempting to coup us from within and hand us off to that of foreign powers of which they are in alliance with. And they're acting within treasonous acts, the same as they did in 1861 with foreign alliances, because in 1861, the Democrats is well aligned again with that of our enemies, Great Britain. France, they reached out to all of America's foreign enemies in an attempt to form an alliance with them to overthrow our nation. Luckily for us, we had some allies in the world that prevented that from happening. Like today, we hear so much from the Democrats, and if you want to know why the Democrats hate Russia, when you look at the structure of communism, you realize, hey, China's communist, Venezuela's right now socialist communist, Cuba's communist. Democrats love them. Why don't they like Russia? Russia's communists like them. Why? I'll tell you why. Not only in the Revolutionary War did Russia allied with that of the Patriots and prevent that of Great Britain from being able to win the war and stop that of other foreign, in the Revolutionary War, Great Britain was going to call on other terroristic allies like the Islamic Muslims. The Islamic Muslims were the primary provider of the black slave trade, and it was Great Britain who informed them that if they lose the war, they're going to lose because they told them. We knew. Thomas Jefferson, in his claims in the Declaration of Independence, was removed because we already knew it was causing civil upset with the Tories here and the slaveholders here in the United States, wanted to mention on how Great Britain had transported that of a foreign people from their homeland onto our country into the bondage of slavery. That passage was removed by Thomas Jefferson because the conflict it was causing already in the nation with civil uprising with those of the slaveholders of the Tories in this nation, the Kingsmen. So we didn't want to stir more in the pot with that and cause more issues. And also we knew too what their plan was, and we recognized, so we removed that because we knew too Great Britain would ally with that of the one who most prospered and profited from that of the slave trade, the Islamic Muslims, because they controlled the black African slave trade. They were the primary provider of the black African slave trade and all the transatlantic slaves. And then we didn't need these other countries coming in and aiding Great Britain because we didn't have very much to fight with as it was anyway. It was incredible we were able to win that war, but obviously that's why we have our trust and faith in God, because we know God had his hand in that war. That's self-evident when you look back and realize that the small little 3% of the whole entire population of the American patriots at that time rose up with just nothing but guns themselves and very little munitions to fight, and beat and defeated the strongest and biggest military of the biggest and strongest nation in the world in that time. Obviously God had his hand in it. And obviously our pursuit then was for righteous reason, because God blessed us and let us have victory. That's the way it goes. And that's the way it was. But like I'm saying, when we look at the Second Amendment, there's a reason it says shall not be infringed. Because without that right, all other rights are vulnerable. Now, here's the question I would ask every American in just reasonable common sense. Right now, we know, and we have known now for the last 40 years, there's been an attack on the Second Amendment. When you look at history and you say to yourself, what is really going on here? You look at Australia for a good example. Australia had a verbatim constitution of ours, and they had a Second Amendment that had an uninfringible clause as well, because they literally took our Constitution and put Australia at the top, and they were verbatim to us, Australia. Now you say, how did Australia wind up infringing the Second Amendment right of the Aussie people? Well, it was mostly because of the same way they're trying to do it here. And if you have common sense and you step back and you look at the big picture, and I'm just saying right now, we're off the Trump thing, we're into what we have to face as reality, to what we need to do to get our republic back. That's what I'm trying to reason with people. When you look at it and you realize how they did it in Australia, was what they did with the Democrats. So, the Democrats took a big part after actually what happened in brief. Understand, first, what the Democrats aided and assisted in was destroying America's alliance with the world allies we had established. At the time in 1978, we had established alliances with nations that were turning Western and adopting that of our like Constitution. This scared the hell out of the world, long-standing totalitarian regimes that were controlling the world, because they realized that if Americanism in this Constitution grows, eventually their people are going to want this too, and then the whole thing of all this long, for thousands of years, establishment of dictatorship and totalitarianism of world control is going to break down and die. They weren't going to let that happen. So the process right away, like I say, in the 244 short years that America's been, they have been on the heels of trying to destroy this nation since it was born. And they're going to continue doing that because we're a threat to them. But when we look at what they did in Australia, the Democrats were the one pushing on them to get control of the situation. They manufactured mass shootings. They actually manufactured this. And we know now, when we look at the history then and we look at then the repeat of things that are happening now, we see how they manufacture, and we see the evidence of fact that's undeniable, that they literally manufactured it. They created the mass murder and the shootings and what have you for the sole purpose of being able to infringe and diminish and remove that right. They were testing the waters to see how they could do it. And Australia was their practice ground where they succeeded. They actually did it. And it was because of mass shootings that were taking place in Australia that were incited by that of the very establishing government trying to diminish the Second Amendment in Australia, who manufactured the mass shootings, who caused them, incited them, and then presented themselves and their solution to the resolve of the very issue they created. This is how it works, people. Common sense. If you're looking at history and you start to see, you see the pattern, you see the actions, you see what they're doing, you see the repetitive of it over time, and you start to realize what people are doing and how they're doing it. Because let me tell you something, we can have the advancements of changes where we got planes now flying in the sky, space shuttles going out to space, we're landing on the moon, we got satellites looking out there right now into the universe beyond anything we ever thought we could imagine. We have electricity, we have cars, now we're having electric cars. We have so much advancements in internet and communications, and all these things, people assume that these things have somehow changed the evil of humanity. Well, I got news for you. Humanity in human nature doesn't change. The only way that human nature changes is by set principles of values, which then culturally align people to live by those set principles and values. Now, you have totalitarian regimes in this world that have been long established for thousands of years that control the entire population under their control as like slaves. They indoctrinate these people from the time they're born. They ingrain only in them what they want them to know, and they control them as like slaves. They're disposable assets to a small group of very elitist, self-proclaimed elitists of humanity who think they are so special above all other humanity that they should rule the world. And these people are literally controlling billions of lives on this earth and affecting billions of lives on this earth to include each and every one of us. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. And this is the facts. This is the facts because they're still present and they're still doing what they do. Take, for instance, a lot of you who think that 160 years ago or 75 years ago or 50 years ago aren't relevant to today. Understand, let's take, for instance, one of our greatest threats, of which is a declared enemy since the very founding of this nation. Our first war was fought with this enemy in 1801. Our second war as an independent nation was fought with them in 1815. We fought with this enemy again in 1901 with World War I. We fought with them again in 1942 in World War II. We fought with them in the Vietnam War, and we continue to have excursion battles with them up to this very day, and that's the totalitarian Islamic Muslims. Now understand, the totalitarian Islamic Muslims' establishment of their national rule or their state rule or their nation's rules, whatever they have over there in their provinces of establishment of states or what have you, has not changed in 1400 years. the totalitarianism of how they control and enslave that of their Muslim citizens has not changed in 1400 years. The law of their nations and their foreign totalitarian rule has not changed in 1400 years. And if you were to go there and witness exactly how it functions in its establishment right now, you would realize it is still like it was 1400 years, as barbarically inhumane as it was 1400 years ago. Nothing has changed. We have known since the establishment of our nation. It was established by George Washington. It was established by John Adams. It was established by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. The first 4 administrations of our government had established and declared the totalitarian Islamic Muslims as the enemies of this nation. And George Washington, as well as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, agreed the enemies of all mankind, of anyone who sought freedom and liberty under that of a constitutional republic, because these people object to that. It is something that in their law and order, and as well their religiousry, of which can't be separated. In the Islamic states, it's the perfect form of what was totalitarianism to its maximum. The goal of all when we look at world history, we realize, like in Egypt, you had what was known as the pharaohs. They were demigods. They self-proclaimed themselves half men, half God, of an elitist status. They put on the smokes and the mirrors and the fancy gold vessels, and they did the fancy dress-up in suits and had the fancy fires and what have you. And they created the illusion of that these people that were called the pharaohs were half men, half God, and they indoctrinated the society of the Egyptian people to believe that from the time they were young children to the time they died. This was indoctrinated in them, that the pharaoh was a half man, half God. And the people of Egypt worshipped him as if he was a half man. This is a pinnacle of true totalitarianism, and where an elitist status has literally enslaved its people to a point that the people worship them as the authority, as if they are gods. Okay? And we see this as well goes on to the emperors of China and Japan. You see, they adapted this same method. We've seen it with Babylon, the rise of one of the greatest nations in the world that nearly did seize it. Do you know King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon actually was the most ever highest reaching of totalitarianism? He literally nearly ruled the entire world as a demigod. And what the problem was, though, you had an incident where he had, people as well had what America was like founded on. There was a people who would not agree to any man being a god. They believed in the one singular God of an ultimate power as the creator of all that we've seen and witnessed before our eyes. And they were the Persians of what was known as the Achaemenid Empire at that time, under what would be known as King Cyrus the Great. And Cyrus the Great was the man who refused to bow to Babylon, and he was the man who killed the great king of Babylon and dissolved Babylon and broke it down and gave freedom and liberty back to people to be able to pursue that of their desires by the self-evident laws of nature and nature's God, of which this nation was founded upon, which we know. When we look at our Declaration of Independence, again, this right here, and when we look at the Declaration of Independence, you want to understand how we were established. Religiousry is one thing. Understand this, and we see this in the debates with our founders. They understood that all religions were that of man's attempted order to try and live by what we believed was a self-evident order of nature and nature's God, by the laws of nature. Okay? But we had kept church and state separate in the United States. You see, we understood, because what we see with totalitarianism, like I said, when you're looking at the pharaohs of Egypt, and you're looking at the emperors of China and Japan, you're looking at the demigods of Babylon, and you're even looking at the Greeks, right? We had the mythical things with the Greeks about Hercules being half man, half God. We understand how the totalitarianism of religiously would be used in a way to enslave humanity, and where the leaders of that nation could endow unto themselves the power and authority as if they were gods. This is totalitarianism. No man is God. No man is God. We are just humans. We're the creation of God. We are not God. Okay? But a lot of people of evil intent don't want to accept that. And there's nothing we can do about that. As long as they exist in the world and they're allowed to continue on with what they're doing, that issue is going to be there for humanity. But when we look at our Declaration of Independence and we read how it starts by our founders, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station in which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them. You see that? You see that? We declare our rights God-given and established by that of the self-evident laws of nature's God. You see, this is what this nation was founded upon. This is what the laws of this nation were supposed to be. America was founded in a way where we were unprecedented in all world history. Nothing ever like, there's nothing to compare America to. You know, I hear many people right now, the ignorant of society, who are within these political establishments of Democrat or Republican, whatever, they talk about, like one of the most stupidest things I hear people say is, well, you know, China doesn't agree with what we're doing. Pakistan doesn't agree with what, Cuba doesn't, you know, all the world leaders are against, they say what we're doing is wrong. Well, understand, if you actually knew the history of America and understood this Declaration of Independence, you would understand that Declaration of Independence was our independence separating from those people. And of course they would not agree. We separated from them because they're dictators, they're totalitarian regimes, they're self-proclaimed elitist supreme rulers who enslaved their people. They were the people we separated from. Monarchies of self-proclaimed elitist kings who claim they have royal blood and special things in their blood that make them ordained by God. We separated from those people, and we declared our right to be separate from those people. Understand, so if they don't agree with us, it's a good thing, not a bad thing, because they're totalitarian scumbags. They're self-proclaimed elitist rulers who have been enslaving humanity now for 13,000 years. So understand, if the world totalitarian and dictators out there don't agree with America, we're doing the right thing. But when you have those people agreeing with America, in our government, that's when we the people should be very afraid. And right now we should be very, very afraid because the world's largest communist totalitarian regime out there, China, loves our current president. They actually had a celebration in China for our current president. That should terrify the entire nation. But it's not, because you know what? The majority of this nation is ignorant and don't know the history and don't understand their place as Americans or the founding principles of American. What it means to be an American and who we are. They don't know. And that's really in part not their fault. But for me, I'm sorry. I have no compassion on it because you know what? Saying that the schools did not teach them properly is no reason they couldn't have gone out and put forth the effort themselves to learn properly. Because everything I know was self-educated. No one taught me what my principles and values are. I took it upon myself in the value of what I recognized as a young kid, a very young child, that how important it was to be an American. And I seen what happened because, you know, what some people may conclude to be bad, in the time of when I was a kid was where many of the Vietnam veterans were returning from war. And I would see the treatment of what people would do to them. And I would hear from the men of World War II how disgraceful that treatment was and how we should honor them. And I was shared with me the wisdom of true Americans of what it meant to be an American, to the point that even as a child, I feared not understanding these things, and I feared being wrong about my place as an American, that I indulged myself in understanding who I was as an American and what it meant to be an American. So there's no excuse for anybody out there. Anybody who doesn't know is a self-serving, no-good, ungrateful bastard, in my opinion. You should be ashamed of yourself. But that doesn't mean you can't redeem yourself now and go learn. But, you know, and then too, in a way, it's a sad thing. When I look at history and I look at culture and I realize that, you know, for the last 50 years, the one thing parents say is respect authority, respect your teachers, listen to your teachers, we tell them. And this government has structured us in such a labor force manner, and where right now the average household works 2 jobs, the parents are never with their kids, and they rely on that of the Department of Education to educate and inform their kids and prepare them for their future. And again, our founders had not established anything in our Constitution for the possibility of that our nation would be infiltrated by foreign enemies, and where these enemies would be able to come in and use a political establishment to take political positions of power within our own government and spread across our nation and use that of our own resources to indoctrinate that of our own American posterity to hate their own nation, to be defiant to that of their own principles and values as Americans, to reject that and disgrace that of our own military men and women who defend and protect the very liberty and freedom those posterity have. And that's what's happening. We had nothing to prepare for this because we did not. It's clear that our founders never assumed this to be possible. But clearly this is what we're facing. The Democratic Party and its establishment is a party within our government, has opened up and allowed that for foreign totalitarian and communist regimes to be able to take up positions within our government at the highest levels of federal, right down to state, county, and city levels across our country in multiple states. To a point right now, it is clearly a threat to the very establishment of our nation, and anyone who denies this is a goddamn fool. The problem, what I'm looking at right now, and what I understand with the minority of people who are as aware as me and concerned as me, is that we are questioning right now, and then two, it's being questioned and it's being vetted, and we're finding out that sadly, the effect of what is the paper brain idiot thing. You know, like for instance, I'm going to give you an example. This is not my opinion. This is the opinion of very respectable military people. When you have a person, there's people in the military, all people in the military is agreed, deserve to be respected within the honor and integrity of them putting their name on that paper and risking their life. But as well, it has to be recognized that if the intent was not true to what the cause is, that honor and that integrity could be tainted. For instance, if you have a person who was, you know, because why they suspended this. There was a time in this nation where you had an elective, if you committed a crime, you could choose jail or military. It was recognized during this time in the late 60s and 70s where this experiment was done, that it was giving an out to people who really had no patriotism. They weren't in there, and what it was doing was preparing people to be able to become something that an enemy could use, because they didn't have no loyalty truly to anybody. And we realized that, you know, just because they were in the military, if we weren't able to actually instill in them the American values and principles, that they would come out of the military a trained asset for that of our enemies rather than that of the American people. And that's a possibility. We've seen that as well. What was mentioned just several weeks ago, speaking with military people about this, the event where we had a Muslim in our military who rose up and shot his own platoon and members of his own platoon because he was truly an enemy within our own military, and this was his goal. He thought he would receive great rewards from Allah and the Islamic nation, of which they do. They hailed this person as a hero in all the Islamic states did. They hailed this guy as a hero because he killed American soldiers as an American soldier by infiltrating our military. To them, this was a great accomplishment. And that's what I'm saying is happening. You see, that kind of person clearly is not an honorable military member of our nation. And we have people within our military that sadly don't know the Constitution, don't give a damn about the Constitution. They're in there gung-ho to be warriors, or they're in there gung-ho to have the power and authority, or they're in there just gung-ho for the attention that they get being in the military. But that makes up a very small minority within our military. The majority of that of our military have been for generation to generation. That of military, like I know a person right now that has a son in the Marines, and you know, and she rightfully has a standing to say how her grandfather, her uncles, and all these people were military, and he is very proud to serve in recognition of knowing that the souls of his family who look down upon him are proud, and he's proud to be an American. This is a young kid I met, and I know, and I'll tell you what, he indulges himself in understanding the truth of our Constitution. He wants to know the truth of our history. He takes it upon himself to learn these things. That's a rare thing you find in this country today, unless it's something among that of true patriot families who have instilled the values and principles of Americanism within their children. And those children become that of humble children who understand that no matter what they learned in school, it may not be the truth. And they have such value for this nation and out of their own self-conviction, they go out and verify what they learn to make sure they're not being misled. And they understand who they are and who they define themselves to be as Americans. That's a great attribute. That makes up a great American in my book. That's what makes a great American. And the blessings we have right now in this country is that we do have a large veteran military presence of good, strong, patriotic people who have taken the time and the self due diligence to understand their place as Americans and the laws and the truth of our Constitution. And those people want change. And Donald Trump was supposed to be that path to change, and Donald Trump failed us. And now we're in a worse situation than we were as a banana republic. But that doesn't mean we can't retake back our nation and control of our nation by that of the authority of the true head of this nation, we the people. We have the law of the Declaration of Independence, which is actually over that of the law of the Constitution, which this government exercises. The problem is how to find a unity between that of our military commanders right now, who seem to be ignorant of that very law themselves. You see, it's said right now among higher ranking military who are aware, looking at that of higher even ranking military, who it appears Donald Trump placed by academic, not actual wisdom. This is what I'm hearing. That there's been many academically smart, paper brain people in our military who have actually never actually seen and understand they've been what it was put the other day, spoiled military brats that have been living on high-paid government welfare in the military their whole lives, that have never put themselves truly at risk of anything, and have sadly done so in inheritances the same as that of a true American would, through family history of patriotism. But with them, it's not that they're bad Americans. It's not that their intent was evil to begin with. They have great pride in who they are, but they just lack the common sense of understanding the importance of the truth of knowing who they are. And they're more complicit with just following orders and doing as they're told. It's been said to me by some of the upper and higher military that I spoke to that they're more a threat than an asset to our military, because they are more acting toward that of like Nazis would act than that of American patriots would act. They think the government is the authority over them. They're blinded to the understanding. And that's where I'm going to get to right now. This is so simple, people. It's not very hard. And for all the people in the military, law enforcement, LEO, and all the people in the FBI of all branches of authority within the law of this nation, I hope, and I know the FBI is watching me like a goddamn hawk. I've already been told that by FBI people I know. So, and I don't know why. I'm just an American. I'm just a kid from Newark, and I'm just a guy who really loves my country and wants my grandchildren to have freedom. You want to watch me, you can watch me all day long. Hopefully you're watching or learn something. I don't know. I don't claim to know everything, but I can assure you what I do know, I know damn well. And that's what we're going to talk about. When you look at the government, you as the people, you took an oath to the Constitution. So even up to the highest command, understand that if the government itself is taking an action to overthrow the American people or to reject the American people's will, they are acting in treason, not the people. And how do you know this? I'm going to get to that. How do you know this? You need to understand that you as the military, the police, the sheriff, and every elected official who has integrity and understands what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the self-serve, because right now, majority of our government is self-serving, despicable people that have no humanity or conscience with them whatsoever. And trust me, they have been intentionally the ones picked to run for government for the truth of what's behind all this. These people have been intentionally handpicked and placed in the front face of us as our government. They were the people who were picked and given the speeches. Trust me, the speeches and the things these people speak of does not represent the true character of who they are. It's all smoke and mirrors. And it's been progressively getting worse over the last 50 years. When I was a young kid, and somebody, I can remember Camden, New Jersey, they had the mayor running. I'll just give you an example of what my experience was. My uncle did not like this guy who was running for mayor. And he went around and he was talking to people in 84 Lumber, and he was talking to people in Bradley's, and everywhere he went he was talking to people, and the people were talking back. They were very reciprocal to this. They understood back then. It was like everybody had an idea of what was really going on. And the thing of what it was a town hall meeting, which we don't have anymore anywhere. I can't find a town hall meeting anywhere that's realistic. I find meetings that I go to that are controlled by that of the elected officials, and where they limit the time and the people can speak, and they don't even let the people speak if they don't like what they're saying. They shut them down and have the sheriff remove them. That's not a town meeting. That's a dictatorial meeting of abusive government. A town meeting is where the people meet and debate about what the government's doing, and then confront the government with their grievance and tell them what they're going to do to change it. That's a real town meeting. That's how I recall it being when I was a kid. And this town meeting, they had it in this big park in Camden, New Jersey. And I'm going to tell you what, literally probably 2,000-3,000 people came out to that meeting. And it was like a barbecue, and everybody was talking about the mayor and the political. And you know what the funny thing about it was? They had their own debate about this guy without him even there. They had that debate where they called up people who knew him when he was a kid. They called up people who went to school with him in elementary school, middle school, and high school to talk about them. They called up neighbors that knew him and lived by him to find out the character of this man. And you know what? It was totally concluded by all this effort put in by the people to know the truth, that this guy was a scumbag and he was not going to get elected. And it was determined that day that they weren't going to elect that guy. And my uncle was so happy about that, this is the way it turned out. And then they started looking at the people they should. And they did the same thing. They went down a line with these same other people who were looking to run for mayor, and they asked the whole crowd, does anybody here grow up next to that guy? Does anybody remember this guy from school? And people would come up and talk. And they all decided that day who they were going to vote for. And that's who they voted for. And I know it came out to victories. I was a little kid at the time working with my uncle during the summer break. And I used to work with my uncle doing, like, he's a man who taught me, he's a mentor, taught me everything I know about as far as, like, my trade. And, he was, to me, a great man. And I know everybody that knew the man loved the man. He was a great guy in a lot of people's eyes. But, and nobody, I don't think a lot of people, even in my family that knew him in one way. They knew him as the happy guy who liked to drink on the weekends and party and make everybody laugh and telling jokes. They never seen him in the political establishment of him as an American. He was a very proud American. I got to see that part of him, and I was very close to him as a child, growing up very close with him, and I admired him greatly. But like I say, I remember when that mayor won, the guy who he won, he was so happy about it. He went out, he celebrated. Matter of fact, he took us all out to dinner. We all had dinner, when and he felt good about it. And I remember him telling us kids, we went to this place that used to be up in, where was that, oh God, I can't remember the name of it. It was a campground he used to take us to sometimes at the end of summer. We would go for a week and everybody get to spend time at this campground. He would set up his van and put up tents and we would have fires. My brother would come in and sometimes family. It would be a great time. It was really some of the best memories I remember as a child was those times at that campground up in Cape May, New Jersey. Cape May, New Jersey, that's where it was. Cape May campgrounds. And I remember, he would sit us kids down and he would tell us about the importance of being an American. And he would try to tell us you need to pay attention to school and don't believe everything they tell you in school. Question everything. And he used to say to all of us, if your teacher's telling you something different than what I'm telling you, you tell Uncle Fred, you'd let me know. Or he would say to his children, you let Dad know. Because he would go in and confront that teacher. It was a responsibility of the American people back then to make sure that our posterity was learning the truth of their history and who they were and the principles and values of what it meant to be an American. We've lost this. We've lost this, people. And we've allowed too much damage to be done because we've been self-serving and not caring about anybody but our selfish selves for the majority in this nation. I can remember throughout my life and my own time seeing many abuses, and I tried to act as like my uncle. My children remember going with me to courtrooms where I would have them sit while I was with my kids and they were with me, and it's not I could do. I had them with me, but I had to go into court because I filed a motion to address a judge and about things I didn't like. And my kids will remember sitting in the background watching their father argue with these judges about things that the people were complaining about. Though now when I look back, I realize, I had no, and it was sad because you know what? I did these things because of speaking with people in the community, being a guy who worked in construction trades and in service. I met a lot of people in my town, in my community, in my county, and I would hear them and I would say to them, hey, well, why don't we do something about that? Everybody's complaining about a judge. They don't like this judge and this judge acting out of order. And I'd be like, well, why don't people get together and do something? They'd be like, well, why don't you, if you do, well, but you know what? Everybody would say that. And I would actually go through, follow through. I would expect all these people to show up. Sad thing about it would be I'd be standing alone in the courtroom, my kids sitting there. That would be the only one. Nobody else would show up. Cowards. They all, the old saying I remember somebody saying is so true. Everybody wants to eat the steak. Nobody wants to slaughter the goddamn cow. Nobody wants to address the ugly of what it takes to get to that juicy good steak. Everybody wants to swim in a pool, but nobody wants to dig the hole for it, right? That's the thing. And that's what we've become, a lazy, ungrateful, undeserving, self-centered, disgraceful people who take for granted the great blessings God has given us in this nation. Not all. There's a large minority of the American people who are very aware. And sadly, the truth is that this nation has never been about the majority. We're not a democracy, as they say. We're not a democratic democracy. Because in a democratic democracy, it's about the majority, not the minority. In America, as a republic, it's about the minority, the individual. Every individual has the same equal rights of all Americans. And any individual who steps up and exercises that one right, exercises it for all Americans' rights in equal. You see, if he's on the integrity of the truth of that right. In our nation, and understanding the laws of nature and nature's God is pretty self-evident. Now, I'm just an American man, and I'm talking here, and I'm hoping people are listening to me because I'm taking the time to do this, and I hope you follow along. And you question the things I'm saying, and you look into the things I'm saying. Because right now it's very important of understanding the establishment of what our founding fathers' intent were. I'm going to tell you something right now. When you really indulge into who they were as people, if you go to the Federal Archives and you read their personal letters back and forth, like George Washington wrote his wife many times, and you see personal letters between him and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and such like that, and John Hancock too as well, and like John Jay and things like this. When you look at the letters between, you start to identify as the person. And then when you see what other people too in their own letters say about this man that knew him personally, you start to understand the character of that person and who they truly are, more so than what the painting of what history paints them out to be. You start to see them as a human, as a person. You understand their values, their principles. And you realize, I realize, they were incredibly genius men with such integrity that was unshakable, that you could only wish the world would prosper in growth of more men of such as those men, because they were truly the thing that established this nation. And they loved the idea and the concept of the ideology of the theory of America so greatly that they were so disciplined to integrity with it, that didn't waver with any of them. They understood the because you know what? I'm going to tell you what too. When you say why would they? Well, I'll tell you, they knew the horrors of the world. There's so much of the truth of history that people don't understand, like even in the founding of this nation, in relation to the issues of slavery and all. People don't understand that, you know, like with Thomas Jefferson's raising about slavery in the Declaration of which was removed, and why our concern, and why since the very beginning. Do you know, in the very founding of this nation in 1777, it was the state of Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery, and to actually give that of the black African slave who was freed in their state the right to vote. It didn't take till 1861. You know, this was a goal from the very beginning. And when you say it wasn't really a white and black issue, it was a humanity issue, an inhumanity issue, I should say, because slavery was all around the world in that time, and it wasn't just black African slaves. They were a big majority of what the slaves were coming in the transatlantic slave trade to the development of the nation of what became America. But in the world, the majority of slaves were white slaves. And this, you know, like you take, for instance, King James of Great Britain, even in the time of the Revolutionary War, there was more white slaves in Great Britain than there was black African slaves in America. He would commonly enslave the common poor of the Irish and Scottish, and he would appoint the Tory over them to work them to death in the brass and copper and steel mines over in Great Britain. And literally they had such little value for them. There's records of things that it was even found by Queen Isabella out of Spain, where she had recognized the inhumanity that when the people would die working the mines, they didn't even have the honor to bring them up for their families to have a proper burial. They told the other slaves, just dig a hole down there and bury them right there. Don't waste time, don't stop work, just keep going. Dig a hole, bury them, and keep going. You know. And it was mentioned about things where the stench of the dead decay down in the mines was you know, unbearable for them in the breathing after a while, because they literally worked these people to death, men, women, and children. They had no humanity in them. They didn't care. And this went on even, you know, it's sadly to say, like I say, to show, I'm just saying this so people understand that slavery was always an inhumanity issue. It was never a race issue. This was a thing that was later developed to be a race issue to cause a division of which obviously right now they still have success with in this nation right now, because it's all about divide and conquer. But in that time there, even after 1861, 1865, when the Civil War ended here, and here in America, in the United States, all men were free, black and white, didn't matter, were free. There was still a massive population of twice that size of the black African slaves who were in the United States, in Great Britain, working in those mines to death, being worked to death. And this was a fact. This is a fact. And people don't understand that. Do you know, too, like I say, too, to understand the inhumanity of it, right here in the United States in the 1850 census, if you look, there were 700,000 free black Americans here in the United States. In the 1850 consensus, before the Civil War even. Which shows you it was not really about blacks, because if you had money, power, prestige, or you had royal connection in Africa, you could be a free American. Many people were not, there was a large percentage, near 40% of all blacks in America were not brought here in the transatlantic slave trade. They came here to be free. They came here to escape foreign totalitarianism. They came here in pursuit of a better life, and they had money, prestige, and power, and gold, so they were able to remain free. And the sad part about it is when you look at 1815, you realize that the majority of them themselves owned between 1 and 5 black slaves themselves. They were elitist people. You see, slavery wasn't about white or black. It was about status of elitism. And they were in favor with the Tories. They believed, because many of those who were those people were of royal African descent, and they had the same kind of outlook as the royal Tories, the Kingsmen, that they were elitists over that of the common man. and they had an alliance with these people. These were the blacks who fought with the Confederacy and took favor with the Confederacy and voted in favor of the Confederacy in keeping slavery in the United States of America during the time of the Revolutionary War. These are things history doesn't teach, but they ought to, because it would break the inferior complex of that of the black American. I didn't really start attending school much. I mean, I went to school on and off periodically, mostly picture day for my mom when I was a kid, and if they tried to make me stay in school, I would just get thrown out. I would fight and argue, whatever. I had my reasons for that, of which is all totally away from any of this. But when I officially started to actually go to school, I was around 13 years old. Up until that point, I was self-educated in everything I know, and I still am to this day. School and paper brains. I have many school certificates, paper brains, and what have you from school and college and things like that, but they are not actually the foundation of anything I know. Everything, even with them, has been self-educated. There's no credit goes to the public school system or any college for me. I already knew before I went and obtained my certificates from them that I already knew self-education of everything I know. And how I did that was I was blessed in being, I guess you could say, smart in the sense of that when I was very young, before I was even 5 years old, my what would be my youngest sister, when she started to attend school, come home with the tracings on the little gray paper with the blue and red lines with the ABCs and dashes, and I wanted to know what that was, and she told me about what it is and that, you know, she's going to learn words and how to read. Well, and I remember asking my uncle where are all the words. He said they're in a dictionary, so I wanted a dictionary. I taught myself to read pictorially before I was 5, so I could help my sister learn. That was my thing, because my oldest brother told me I'm responsible for her, and I took things literal as a kid. So that's how I became. So if you wonder, like, how did you learn yourself if you never went to school? That's how I taught myself to read. Libraries are an important thing in the United States. Knowledge. Power, and they always just say knowledge is power, and I understood this is true. To have knowledge and access to knowledge should be unrestricted in this country, and you as the American people right now have no excuse. Nobody has an excuse to why they don't understand or know a thing. Because today is when I was a kid, you wanted to know something, you had to go to the library. You had to find the books. You had to read the books hard copy. And you had all kind of rules with taking a book out of the library if you wanted to take it home. And you had certain times you had to bring it back. And if you didn't bring it back in time, you got fined a nickel. I mean, it was freaking crazy. And to me at that time, a nickel was like a shoe shine. I worked for my money, you know, and I didn't want to do these things. But, you know, that's how it was back then. It was all hard on... You know, today you got the internet, you got your phone, you can pull up the world of knowledge, and there's no reason, no excuse. You could be in a bathroom taking a dump and be reading and learning something today, okay, to understand your place as a human, as an American in this world. There's no excuse for the ignorance that we have in this nation right now. Just no excuse for it. With the advancements in technology and the ability people can learn, as you see right here, look what I'm doing right now. I'm literally able to broadcast myself out on the internet and show the world of knowledge right here on a screen next to my head, as if I, like, things that the news wasn't even as advanced back in the 1970s. Hell, I remember when black and white TV went away and color TV came out. And, you know, that's what I'm saying. Back then, they didn't have the advancement to do what I'm doing right now, back then. So, I mean, and I'm able to do this, and I'm trying to do this, and I'm not trying to be ignorant of anybody. I'm not trying to sound like I'm more smarter than anybody. I'm just trying to wake people up to understand that we have to take the time to learn our place, understand the truth. Now, I'm going to get back to what I'm saying about the laws of nature and nature's God real quick. Understand that it was our founders' vision that this would be the foundation of law in this nation, unlike any other law in the world. We wouldn't allow for a totalitarian regime of religiously of establishment with government, because we would establish a non-authoritarian government that would be acting as a service provider to us to do the task we hand off to them to do. They wouldn't be an authoritarian government that dictates and rules over us, telling us what to do. That was not the intent. And we also had the intent that through that of the establishment of our courts with our judges, that we would have judges who would not be picked by their paper brain idiocy. You see, let me explain to you. I'm all for knowledge and learning. I wouldn't know anything without the ability to read and learn, and it's a great thing. Knowledge is a great thing. But understand, knowledge without wisdom is worthless information. You could go to college and you can learn everything in college and pass everything. You could be great at taking tests, but if you lack the common sense of knowing how to apply what you learned and actually put it into practice, and where you can actually do something real and accomplish something real that has a true and real effect that benefits humanity or people, if you don't have that common sense to do that, you're just a paper brain idiot. You're just like a book. You're like a book. You see, a book is paper. And it's just a binder that has written words of knowledge. But itself, it's worthless in doing anything with its knowledge because it has no ability. And if you're like a book brain, you're worthless. You got no knowledge. You got no common sense. That doesn't mean you're hopeless. You could take the initiative to try and do something with it. But most people I found that are educated within positions that I've come across and I've seen in the world, I've rarely ever worked for anybody. I've been self-employed all my life. I trust me more than anybody with my own life. And that's just the way it's been. But in people I see in positions of power, even with government and stuff, you talk with these people for a while, you realize, God, this person doesn't have a damn clue. They have a degree. That's it. They have that degree on the wall. And everybody looks at the degree, never looks at the character of the person, never questions the integrity of the person or their common sense. They just assume because they have the paper brain on the wall given them from the Wizard of Oz that they are all-knowing and endowed with all wisdom and honor. That's it. And this is the way that foreign interest has been able to establish it in this nation. When we look at Harvard and Princeton, these are schools that came over from Great Britain, the very enemy of America. And we allowed the systems of their existence to infiltrate into our nation and indoctrinate that by education of that of our own people. We allowed for what is known as the educational class separation. And that's where and when we look in the 60s and the 70s, we see the boom in this thing. And today, when we look at what happened with affirmative action and how this government now through foreign interests has worked, you realize that nobody questions anybody with a paper brain. I mean, I have a lot of paper brains. I'm EPA certified, master level certified, and many different things because of life, wisdom, experience, and as well education on things that I went to school for. Not so much really went to school. I already knew before I went. I just went there to take the test, and do it like my sister was impressed that I have my 2-year associates in thermodynamics. But I actually completed. I have the proof of the whole thing was done in 31 days. I just took the test. I didn't need, and the college gave me my degree in it, whatever. But that's how it goes. I already knew. I taught myself. So that's the way it was. But the paper brain itself, if I don't know how to apply it and use it, means nothing. I have financial certifications. I have a financial certified financial consultant. I was a former licensed mortgage broker. I was a former Security Series 7's license. I did all these things because, just the knowledge. I guess I want that knowledge. Some of them I have practical wisdom with, and some of them I don't. And it's just I'm an educated idiot in it. There's a lot of things I'm an educated idiot in. There's a lot of things I have great knowledge of and never applied in wisdom to actually use or put into practice that I just have knowledge of. I'm an educated idiot on it. I've never applied it. It's just for the point of attaining knowledge in it out of interest, I guess. So I admit myself there's a lot of things I'm an educated idiot on. I just want people to understand I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody in that statement. I'm just stating a fact. But if you understand here, back to what I'm saying now, for my common sense, and this is in practical as well as use of what I've seen and I experience in my own life and what I understand by the shared wisdom of that of our founders. The law here by our judges was to be where we had judges of character. You pick a judge by the character of people who knew him, like I was talking about earlier with the mayor, when my uncle had that election there. You pick that judge by character of what people say of who he was his whole life. And that's, that doesn't say that some people don't change. There's people in politics that you see where some people didn't like him when they were a kid, and they said, that guy had a lot of... But hey, later in life, I'll tell you what, he had an incident that changed him, and then he became... And then as you see in the progression of life, you see somebody who was questionable becomes non-questionable and has good integrity and has good character. And you realize, okay, wisdom has dictated this man's defining and made him a good man. And on those things, you have to have the common sense to be able to weigh that things. And that's how we should be picking people for our government. We shouldn't be picking people by the media's depiction of them through this fantasy. Like you look at Barack Obama. They pitch Barack Obama off as this, interracial kid from an interracial family of apple pie, all American. He's a half black, half white kid who was like a considered genius, went to Harvard, he conquered Harvard, now he's an attorney, and then he's been in the government, and now he's running for president. In truth, none of that was real. None of that was real. This kid hated America. He's always hated America. He was a drug-toting, friggin' radical Islamic Muslim most of his young life. And obviously he was raised by a radical foreign Islamic Muslim father. Both his stepfather as well was an Asian Muslim. This kid was indoctrinated with the ideology of that of the totalitarian regimes of Islam. He hated this country. And that became self-evident. His parents, his grandparents, who he wound up living with later in life, were proud declared communist. You know, I mean, look up on the history of it. That's what I'm saying. Nobody takes time. His grandparents were proud communists in Hawaii. They were proud communists. You know, and this kid, he had mentors who were communists. And these mentors he met through that of his grandfather, who was a favored communism. And he was not the American apple pie, everybody said. Even the church, now the man claimed later in life that he converted from Islam back to Christianity with a church in Chicago, of which the minister in that church became very controversial. He had to separate himself from, because anybody in research that knows anything about American history and the Nation of Islam and such like that knew that the minister that he had at his church there was best friends with Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, and that what he did there was try to bring in, through using Christianity as a front, that of the black community, youth of men, in his, you know, that would, because their family, most of the, you know, family, if they were Christian, they would, their sons, he would lure them in and then slowly lead them to Farrakhan to take them away from Christianity into the Nation of Islam. So that's what that church was, with that minister going on. And anybody, I think, that knows of it knows the truth of that matter. And anybody who denies it is a goddamn liar and is just trying to cover it up. That's what happened. But when you look at the truth of who Barack Obama was, he was not the apple pie. They pitched him out. But the media pitched him out. The Democratic Party pitched him out. They made it sound that way. And anybody who spoke against it was accused of being a bigot, a racist, or, you know, just an un-American jerk-off, I guess. You know, because the mainstream wanted this guy. And why did the mainstream? Some people, like I get some people go, well, why would the Democrats? Why would the government do? Why would we? Well, you know, one, if you understood the truth of the Democratic Party, you would understand they're not a part of America. They never were a part of America. And their goal and pursuit has been to overthrow America and take control of America. So it's the very founding of America. So in that basis, they understand the Democratic Party is a democratic democracy of majority rule and seeks that of the favor of that of the world's totalitarian regimes in their democratic democracies. We're a republic, America, and we have very few allies because we're the first ever to rise as a nation like we are. That's what people need to understand. There is no other America in the world. We are the first. We are the first, and we've only been for 244 years in this world history. And we're already dying. It's very sad. As Thomas Jefferson said when he was asked what he gave us, he said, a republic if you can keep it. I can't believe in 244 years we're at the brink of losing it already. It's just disgraceful. And it's because of just ungrateful people in this nation, for the majority, who are self-serving, ungrateful people, who are just unwilling to take the time to learn their place as Americans, or even devote that of any little time of their own little lives to understand the truth of. Because I'm going to tell you what, though, you're going to live to regret it if it fails. Because I can assure you, when you look at world history and what happens when a nation becomes as ignorantly stupid as we are, and as ungrateful as we are, and they allow the overthrow, you will live to witness the horrors of what your ignorance has caused. Believe me, if it fails, you'll live to witness the horrors, and you will not be able to do a damn thing about it when it comes. And as in the time of when Genghis Khan was here, and he said, had your sins not been so great, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. You will suffer the punishment of your great sins out of your ignorance and your selfishness and your self-centeredness of not giving a damn for anybody but yourself, and not doing your part as an American. You will understand the punishment of being so ungrateful for the blessings of God which we were given in this nation. If it should come to it, you will suffer it, and you'll be deserving of every bit of it that's afflicted upon you. That I will say for sure. Any American out there who is right now so ignorant they don't understand the truth of the threat they pose to this nation and our posterity, if it comes, you are the one deserving of the hell it will afflict upon you. That's a damn fact. But it's the ones who aren't. As we know, and as throughout history, in this nation, it has always been about that minority, the true people, and the benefit of those who don't really care. They benefit in it with that of those who we love, and that of what the men and the women of this nation have sustained this nation for 244 years, are willing to give their life for that which they love, their families, that of the true Americans, that of the people who have the instilled values of who you are, and who are grateful for that of the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people before us who gave and risked their lives to sustain it so that we would inherit it this day and have this great blessing of this great nation and our freedom and liberty. We need to, as a people, come together. We need to, as a people, understand our history. We need to, as a people, understand our place and our position of power and authority as that of the ruling authority over this nation and this government. Our laws, as I'm trying to get to the point of, are self-evident. By nature, and nature's God. And it was intended that our legal system operate by such. In the sense of that, you know, to say, for an example, if you were to say, what is the law and what is criminal? In my study I have a book of the Constitution. I've read many legal books. I've read many things, and I've listened to, many, like Sawwell, some people who have theories about law, and I've read many older books about people who theorized about law that never got respect. They were just common people, because lawyers would say, he's not a lawyer. He doesn't have the paper brain from the Wizard of Oz like me, so I don't agree with him. I'm the authority of all, because look, my paper brain on the wall. That's the way we've been. We've had this elitist society now of the educated elitist and the government elitist against that of the common man. As if the common man who founded this nation and established this nation doesn't have the common sense to understand what he did. Well, we do. We do. Common sense is not something a school can teach you. It's something that comes with trial and error of wisdom and application of real effort put forth. And the majority of attorneys in this nation have done nothing for nobody. Nobody. They're self-entitled elitist scumbags, in my opinion. Not all. There's some great attorneys I know, but the majority are that. And the same right now in this world right now with most professional. Doctors are the same. Psychologists are the same. The majority of government is the same. Most professional positions of that of paper-brained idiots are nothing but self-serving, ungrateful, inhumane scumbags. And that's sad to say, but that is the truth. That's the truth if you really look into them and you get to know them. I've seen this in my 50-year period, which I'm going to share with the posterity. When I was younger, and I can remember my mom taking me to the doctor, and I would talk to the doctor, and I'd say, why did you become a doctor? And this is how I knew. I used to tell my mom that either afterward if I trust that doctor or I don't trust that doctor. I would go by what they tell me. I was taught this by my uncle, how to do this measuring of character. The doctor would say to me, well, you see that car out there? It's a goddamn Cadillac, kid. You see this gold here? Look at that Rolex. I realized this guy's not a doctor because he cares about me or my mom. He's not a doctor because he cares about anybody. He's in it for the money. And as I grew up and in life in the last 50 years going forward, I come to realize that most doctors are like that scumbag. They don't give a damn about nobody. They're in it for the money. They do as they told. They don't care. All they want to do is brag about their Corvette, their big house, their gold, their jewelry, and be Mr. All that. That's all they're about. And I remember when I was a kid too, I had many doctors and people I knew in the communities and customers, my uncle, that we would go and see, people that were smart people. They made investments, they had properties, whatever my uncle would work on, and I would ask them, why did you become a doctor? And they would say, well, there's nothing like when you go out, and you do this, and you have a person come in, and you see the whole family stressed, and somebody's sick, and then you, by your wisdom of what you're able to actually help them and help them get better and recover, and then the whole family, the happiness, you see the joy. I realized that's a good damn doctor. You see, that's a doctor who became a doctor because he cares. You see, this is how you weigh the judgment of a person. This is how you check the character of a person. And when you say to yourself, what is the laws in relation to these things? How do we, the law could aid in preventing bad people from having positions of power if we applied them like it was intended by our founders. And I know a lot of people say, well, get to the point already. But I'm going to do that. I'm going to explain to you how a right becomes a crime from my humble, common American view, okay? Let's say you got two people debating in a park. And one is making his point, and the other's making his point. And it gets to a point where one actually is starting to make the other guy's point look foolish. And now the other guy's getting angry. Now, at this point, they're both exercising the same right of expression and freedom of speech. They're both freely allowed to say whatever they want. No one can stop them. That's their right. And then as long as they stay within the realm of equal respect to giving each the proper amount of integrity to be able to speak their mind, it's a right that's being exercised and it's not criminal. Now, it gets to a point, though, where the one guy has actually made the other guy look like a fool, to where everybody's realizing the other guy, everything he's saying, he's wrong and it's not good. And then all of a sudden that guy, now the one guy, let's just look, and we're going to say one guy's 250 pounds, the other guy's 90 pounds. Small little skinny guy with glasses, and the other guy's this big brawly guy, right? And then the big brawly guy walks over, slaps his hand, tells the guy, you shut up. He grabs him by the head, you shut the hell up. At that point, when you're exercising a right becomes criminal. When you will not respect another to exercise and equal the very right that you're exercising, you're a criminal. When you stop them and you infringe their right, you become criminal. That line right there is where it crossed the line, and you've taken the exercising of a right to a criminal action. And it's at that point the law has the right to step in, remove that man's hand from that guy's mouth, separate them and stop that man from being able to harm that man, or stop that man from being able to speak his mind. And the law protects him in a right to speak his mind in equal. And if that man can't respect it, he gets locked up for breaking the law. Because the law is of equality to all. One nation of all people of all equal. That's who we are. You see, I hope you understand, that's the example. You see, when you're willing to exercise a right yourself to a point you're not willing to allow others to exercise, you're acting criminal. When you're allowing all to exercise an equal to what you are, and you're willing to face the humility of those who can exercise the right into a position against you in opposition, and you realize the truth of what they're saying, you see, this is the purpose. When we exercise an equal, we come to a conclusion of truth. You see, had the guy realized that the majority of people seeing him foolish, and that the comments that the other guy were making were proving his invalid points, had he been humble enough to say, wow, I'm wrong, we could come to a conclusion where everybody's right. And it's right for everybody. But it's that inability, that evil nature in people who want to be dominant and can't face when they're wrong, their ego. And that's not a thing that's natural in people. It's a thing indoctrinated in people. It's a thing bred. Usually a person like that comes from a family of people like that. Usually a person that doesn't have the ability to extend equality to others is somebody who has been raised elitist in mind by his own family. He has elitist parents that are that way. He has parents who feel that they have a right over that of others or something. And it's inherent that way. It's indoctrinated that way. It's learned. Like hate is learned. This is a fact. I mean, it's a fact. It's just self-evident. People teach hate. Like in this world with racism, you got many white races, black races, red races, yellow races. Everybody's got there's no defining color of race. It's just a matter of evil within people and where it's taught and it's learned. And then it's passed on generation to generation. It raises generations of evil, just disgraceful people. But understand, that's the principle of our laws in this nation. All law was to be applied that way. To that, what was self-evident and undeniable is the fact of law. That's it. You know, and then you had to have the reasonable common sense, I'm going to continue here, to understand how our law and our system of process of penal code and law was supposed to work. And my common understanding is that of a regular common sense American. You see, now the law itself is a written down law. It's a rule that we all agree on, say, you know, like you shouldn't kill, thou shalt not kill, right? It's a law. Murder's against the law. And everybody can agree on that. You can say, well, murder's against the law. So anybody who kills, we make a law, we say you get life in prison, you kill somebody. But is it every case of when you kill somebody? Don't we have to have reasonable common sense in this? Is there a justifiable reason to kill somebody? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And you see, that's where we rely on common sense and common reasonable judgment of that of our peers and ourselves, and where we reason these things in debate without silencing each other's ability to make their point, so that we can come to a conclusion of what's best for everybody and right for everybody. You see, if some guy's running down the road with a baseball bat bashing people in the goddamn head because he's lost his mind and he just wants to kill people, and some guy says, hey, look at that guy with the baseball bat bashing people's heads in and killing them, and the guy with him says, oh my God, I got to stop that guy, and he runs over there and he grabs a gun and he boom, 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 and he shoots that guy inside. Does that guy get life in prison? You see, the written law can't read that. The written law doesn't have the common sense or ability to understand what's taking place here. The written law that says that if you kill somebody, you go to prison for life is a written law. It doesn't have humanity. It doesn't have the reasoning of judgment. It doesn't have the eyes or the ears to conclude what actually happened that would either make it an unjust act or a just act. That takes a reasonable person with common sense of reasonable understanding of the situation to evaluate it. That's why we have judges. If the written law itself could apply itself and function without that of humanity, we wouldn't need judges. It would just be like we could have a computer, right, that has a little screen, and you just type in, man killed somebody, and the law pops up and says, boop, this is the punishment. Boop, okay, that's the punishment that the law says. It doesn't work that way. You have to reason, because you have to realize that guy who did that saved people in killing a man. So the act there is justified. You see, that's how it is. That's how it's justified. You have to have somebody of reasonable sense. But you see, now, if we have paper-brained idiots as judges and state attorneys who only know how to read the law, they don't have the common sense or the humanity in them or the wisdom from cause and effect of understanding real life to rationalize these things as I'm saying. They're as dangerous as just a written law with no brain. You understand me? And that's what we have going on right now. When I've grown in my last 50 years, I've met very few judges. I have to say, I will say this now. There's one judge who was in Citrus County named Judge Law. And in the understanding of him and meeting him and seeing the integrity of this man, I have to say he is one of the most honorable judges I have ever met in my life. Because you know what? To him, it is to the letter of the law, with that of incredible humanity of reasoning and common sense, and what he applies things to. And he doesn't play around. He protects everybody equally from what I've seen. He was one of the most respected judges. He's the only one that's ever gave me hope and humanity within the justice system, was Judge Law of Citrus County. That's a man, I got to say, you know. And I had thought that I had seen potential for a former, was a lawyer who's now a judge, 5th Circuit up in Hernando County, 5th Circuit Judge Thomas Eiderman. I knew him when he was a lawyer, and believe me, it wasn't a good relationship because he was my ex-wife's lawyer, and that man had put me through hell as an attorney. But I believe by the end of it, in the conclusion of things what came, of the things he witnessed in life, of what afflicted me, and the things and events that happened, of which he was part of in my life, outside of that, even of when he was, and including that of when he was with my attorney for my ex-wife, I believe that maybe wisdom and God had somehow reached this man to where he would do the right thing. Of which I got to say, you know, sometimes in life you realize that some people just don't fear hell. And that's where they're going. It's just sad. You see, it's just sad because out of greed and drunkenness and power and total disregard for humanity, they just lose their humanity. And it appears he's one in that example from what I've been witnessing and watching him without him even knowing it in his actions as a judge. The man has no humanity. He has no conscience. He doesn't care about anything but himself, his family, and the wealth and the power he has from what he does. And he could give a shit for anybody from what I see. And that's just sad. That's just sad. He's definitely no Judge Law. And I've seen these things like in my experience as somebody, I could reference again, or Hernando County would have been what was his name? It'll come to me in a minute. Tom Brink, Judge Tom Brink out of Hernando County, is the perfect example of an educated, book-smart idiot. This man was by the letter of the law, but had no rational common sense. He had to reference the law. He could never make a decision out of that of reasonable common sense. And he was a destructive nature judge who did no good for humanity or the court system. And that's the danger we have right now, because the majority of what we have in our court systems right now that make up our judges and our state attorneys are paper-brain educated idiots that have no common sense or humanity of reasoning in them. They don't know how to reason the law to that of humanity. They don't care, and they don't care. They didn't become judges and lawyers because they care about people. They're like the scumbag doctor. They did it for the power, the prestige, the ability to brag, and the status. It wasn't about being a good judge. And we didn't pick them. We didn't pick them because they're a good judge. We picked them on a propagated BS of that they have the paper brain. It's amazing. You know, you can go to school for 6 years and pass the bar, and all of a sudden you are a person of integrity and honor and distinguishment beyond measure. You know, it's just amazing. Just because you got the paper brain from the Wizard of Oz, they gave you the paper. Let me ask you something. Where in college do you see anything of the principles and values of that of humanity being instilled in people? Show me something that can be taught to people that makes them honorable. I always thought honor came by actions. Came by actions of what people would do out of their own conscious decisions that reflect a truly honorable action. And on that, they get bestowed with honor. You see, you can't learn honor. You can't obtain honor because you studied something and you passed a test. You obtain honor by what you take from what you learned when you apply it to the world in application of practical use in a way that demonstrates a fairness of equality for all in an honorable way. That's when you become honorable. It can't be bestowed until you take the action of earning your honor, like our military men and women who go to war. You see, and like we were saying before, you can have people who go into the military with the intent out of that of just wanting the attention from being in the military, with no true patriotism whatsoever. But even them, in the face of war, when it's called, they may become truly what they never were. Because in that moment, if they're willing to stand up and put their life on a line and look back and realize that's the people I defend, this is where I am in the military, this is who I am, I'm willing to die and I'm going to fight these people, they become honorable. The men who knew the whole time became honorable. I've met so many honorable men, I'll tell you, I don't compare to these people of some of the World War II veterans and Vietnam veterans I know. I have very few of World War II veterans World War II veterans still alive that I know. And I've been so blessed to know so many in Florida because so many came here to retire. And I still know many Vietnam veterans who I am so honored to know and hear their stories. Many of them have shared their stories with me about what they experienced there, what they went and seen, what they did, and how they feel about it now and why they did it. You know, and I'll tell you one thing, in all my life here in Florida, I have met literally tens of thousands of veterans here. And I'm not kidding you. I know I've met, you know, and I've had great experience. I met Holocaust survivors. My children growing up as well had a great interest in the very things I am as being my kids they would. And, you know, I remember my one son, he studied greatly about like German history, even learned to speak German. And one of the great things was having him come, and I got to watch him sit down with a Holocaust survivor and discuss the history with her in German, speaking in German. Though she said he spoke kind of like low-class German, it wasn't high-class German. But, you know, for an American learning German, I guess it was acceptable to her. But it was a privilege to watch him speak with her and learn directly from a Holocaust survivor the truth of what took place, so that he would not have any ability to follow the idiocy of what we see today with people trying to claim it never even happened. My son, you can't do that. See, he had firsthand knowledge of it from somebody who was actually there. They had the tattoo. They were a Holocaust survivor. So, you know, and that's what I'm saying. I know the truth of that thing. You know, and then the wisdom shared with me from veterans. And all my life, I've always, if the veteran was willing to speak, because some don't want to talk about it, and I get that, and you respect that. But those who are willing to speak, one question I would ask them, I would get the same answer over and over and over again. Now understand, these were not paper brain idiots. They didn't have any certifications from anybody telling them who they were or what prestigious honors they had or what anything. These were just true Americans who loved this country, took the time to understand this country, knew their Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the history of this nation, and they understood and defined themselves in the place of who they were as an American. And when I would ask them, why did you, because these were people who were from World War II, willingly went on the call, willingly heard. They didn't go down and have to be drafted. They enlisted. They went. And they tell the story about what they endured there, and I would be like in shock at some of the things you would hear of what they witnessed. You know, and you can only imagine in your own mind what it must have been like. But then in the end, I would say to them, can you tell me one thing? Why? Why would you do that? And I have to say it's an honorable thing for many of their questions, because a lot of them said to me, for you, kid. For you. That hits you. Because I'm like, who am I? Why me? And they say, because you're an American. The posterity. A lot of them say, you know, they looked at their mom, their dad, their sisters, their neighbors' kids, the kids playing in the street. And they thought about what they were seeing on the news about what was going on. And they watched that on the news in horror at these soldiers just shooting down lines of people. And they imagined in their own mind their block with these Nazis marching down, doing this to their neighbors' kids, their brothers, and they ran right to the enlistment office, and they wanted to go meet them on that ground and stop them. That's a friggin' true American. You see, that's American. That's the greatness of America. All you idiots today talk about when was America ever great? It was great by the people like that. They were great Americans, and they were the greatness of what made America possible. They're the people of who America is founded upon. That's the heritage of who we are as the American people. The greatest people ever in this world to rise. That's who they were. They didn't know paper brain or anything, and I'll tell you what, half the cowards that had the paper brain in college would never be the man enough to do what those men did. But they sure in hell would be the coward enough and the ungrateful enough to benefit from it, wouldn't they? Because that's what they are today. All of you people who hold the most powerful positions in this world and take a position of such authority and powers among the people themselves in the common, who claim yourself to be so elitist on your self-endowed honor and integrity by that of your little paper brain, you are able to do all that you do by the true men who I speak of. Those men who gave their life and were willing to put their life on the line to ensure you the pursuit of your happiness to anything of what you want unlimited. But yet, how disgraceful are you, the state attorneys, the judges, and the legislators, who right now go and try to dictate the very law to strip the right of the American common man to have his own unrestricted pursuit to happiness, or his own right to his own right of defense, under that of the unfringible declared right of that of the common man who gives it to you, How disgraceful are you? Your certificate and your degree by these people who say you're honorable and you have integrity and you're somebody of upstanding. You're being lied to and you're a disgrace to this nation. You're the very cause of the cancer that's killing this nation, and you don't even see it. You don't even see it. You're so disgraceful. But when I would ask those men, this is what they would tell me. For the common American, they did it. For what they loved, they did it. And I can remember many saying to me in it, I had one man, I remember, he was so honest. He said to me, but to be honest with you, kid, you know what? Because I said to him, I told him about what others said, and I was expecting that moment where I'd have that with him. He would say, because of you, kid. And I realized, no, it wasn't because of me. He made it pretty clear it wasn't because of me. It wasn't because of any other American. But he also made clear still that he maintained his integrity and honor, and how he, and in the end of it, how I got it. Because he said to me, it was because of my family. I wanted my mom to be safe. I didn't give a damn about anybody but my family. I wanted to stop my family from being hurt because I loved them. And he said, but I understood. I understood, and I weighed secondary to my family the understanding of that what I would do if I could succeed in protecting my family would protect all families in America and all the American people. And that added to the value of what gave me the determination to come home alive and succeed in why I went. So with that, he maintained his integrity and honor. It was just in a stronger selfish sense of that of only what he loved, which I think in truth, anyone, if I was to pose that question to them and him, would feel the same. But understand what I'm saying about the law and how this all applies. It's common sense. If we were, our law and our government right now has become of what it was for why we declared our independence. And the time of why we declared our independence was because King James III was literally a tyrant, a no-good scumbag. And what he was trying to do was totalitarianize Christianity. You see, the King James himself, the founder who wrote the King James Bible, really didn't believe in God. He was an atheist. He didn't care a damn thing about Jesus Christ or Christianity. What he cared about was the ability to use Jesus and Christianity as a way to ordain himself by God so he could maintain power. And so did every king after him. Right up to the time of our Revolutionary War, and where we faced it with the kings of Great Britain in that time. They don't care about it. Religion to them was a way of ordaining themselves as the authority of God for totalitarianism rule of that as a king. You see, this is what they claimed their self-proclaimed status of elitism on. They were ordained by God. They had royal blood given by God. And in truth, when you study history of the Bible and stuff, and you go back to the time of King David and such like these, you find out that King James had altered these words. There was really no king. He was a tribal leader. He was a highly respected man of great integrity and moral judgment by his people. They didn't have kings back in those days. They weren't called kings. They were tribal leaders. They were the most trusted of the elders of their tribes. It wasn't like, but you see, they changed these names so that matches the agenda of what they want people to see as they alter and amend and change these things going forward in the interpretations, as all totalitarians do. And we just don't have that common sense of understanding because these things aren't taught. Today, we allowed our education system to become a systematic. Teachers are no longer really teachers either. There are some good teachers, and sadly to say, I've known many good teachers, and sadly to say, in the last 15 years, 20 years, I've seen many good teachers leave the profession because of the insanity we the people have allowed to creep into that of our Department of Education, and the idiocy of what we're seeing right now. Our Department of Education is not a Department of Education anymore. It's disgraceful. All it is now is an indoctrination station for that of foreign interest in this government. They have our children so dumbed down it's ridiculous. When you see some of the audits going on right now on YouTube, go up and look about the questioning of college students in relation to American history. It's disgraceful. When you see, I seen one video where a colored woman out of Georgia was attending law school, and she was in her second year, and he asked her when the Civil War was, and she said it in 1965. This is how dumbed down they are. And if you want to look at the effects of truth to how dumbed down people can be, and how dumbed down very people in our government are, and how dumbed down even attorneys can be, just take a look at Hank Johnson out of Georgia. Representative Hank Johnson. Go look up the video on YouTube about Guam capsizing and understand how stupid a person can be. This is a guy who, by his paper brain, actually a federal appeals judge handling major cases for massive crime and racketeering and human trafficking and whatever, and this guy was letting people up. He's an educated idiot. This was a guy positioned in the position he was in through affirmative action. He became an attorney. And when you realize how stupid this man is, there's no denying that this guy has no honor, no integrity, and clearly is an educated idiot and more of a threat to that of America and the system of our government and the courts than he is anything of an asset, because this guy's an idiot. Go watch the video on this guy here who is concerned about Guam capsizing. And you'll realize I'm telling you the truth. Hank Johnson. Go look it up. And understand that's the example right there of foreign interest and how foreign interest creeps in and how they use education. Because you see with him, with affirmative action, they got this man to be an attorney. They boost his ego. They put him where they want him as an appeals judge to handle high racketeering cases and what have you. And where those of the corrupt nature behind the scenes that nobody sees could take the big payoffs from the criminals of hundreds, 200, 300,000 or millions of dollars. And then they come and they get Hank Johnson to grant the appeal and let this guy. And Hank Johnson's thinks he's doing the right thing. Because, you know, and I know this to be a fact, because in speaking with politicians that had somewhat of a level of integrity, even the Democrats, and I say to them, how, you know, when I heard about these things back, and I would be like, question, like, oh my God, how can somebody be so stupid? And then I talk to people, and I would say, what is it? And they're like, oh, Hank Johnson, you get him to do anything. He walks around the hallways talking about, you know, saying to people, hey, look, I'm thinking about this, and I'm wondering, like, what do you think about that? What do you think I should do? And whatever they tell him he should do, that's what he does. He doesn't have the common sense, reasonable common sense in his own head. And this you can see even by watching the man talk. You watch this guy talk, you realize this guy's an idiot. He's a total idiot. And you realize, too, that mostly everything he says, what you see, he always has a speech written out for him. You know, and somebody's helped him do that speech, because, you know, like when you do a speech yourself and you write it yourself, you don't forget it. You don't even need the written. You know what you're going to say. You know, when you're speaking the truth, it just comes natural. You just say it. You don't need it. It's like me. I'm doing all this. It's natural from my own wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. I'm just speaking about who I am as who I really am. I have no script on this right now. And that's how you know. But when a man is like constantly, and then, hey, this is what I mean, and by my integrity, I intend to, and you realize he doesn't even know what the hell he's saying. Like we see right now with Joe Biden. That's what Joe Biden does. You know, and that's what most of these politicians do. They all have their little screen on the side where they're reading and they don't even know what the hell they're saying. Like the news right now. The news is not truly news, people. I think anybody right now, that's what they mean by fake news. I mean, Donald Trump and his quest of what, even though at the end he failed greatly, a lot of things he did expose were true and undeniable. And what he did was he built upon those principles nobody could deny, like with the fake news. Most of these people on the news we see are just that. They're script readers. They come in, they have no idea what they're going to say. They just read the script and they try to act the emotions with it, and they go along with the program. But they're not really. They don't know. They go. If you were to ask them 2 hours after they got home what they thought, they probably don't even remember. It was all on script. They don't remember. And we buy this. We buy this. We all sit home and we watch and we buy this stuff and we listen to the narrative. And none of us have any more. You know, I'm telling you, we need to get back to roots, people. We need to get back to community. We need to start coming together in public farm communities and having public debate in our communities, like town hall meetings like we used to have. And we need to know ourselves as the American people and who our neighbors are. And we need to share this. You see, that's how it used to be done. When a community, like when things went outside of the local mayor and it was going to go to the governor, you would have these town hall meetings too. And then the people in that town would get together with a couple people from the next town and they would say, hey, what was your group? And they would say, yeah, oh, we agree on that. That's how we felt too. I'm going to let them know over in Monmouth County. That's how we feel. I'll be going over next week. They're going to have their thing. And it would spread through the state. And by the time of the election, everybody in the state had a mutual foundation of agreement among them on what they were going to do and how they were going to vote. And to be honest with you, too, the representatives themselves back then, like when I'm talking about the time when they had the town hall meeting in Camden with my uncle, they had their district representative. He had to be there, and he didn't have any damn say. He was there to listen to what the people were, and at the end, the people told him, you heard what we said, right? That's what you're representing. You go back and you tell them what we want. You understand? That's the way it was. See, the representative didn't go and represent by his own accord of what his own will was. He had to go and reflect the will of the people because the people were involved and they had him there as a community representative to go, and he understood his job as a representative. But today, and the same with the senators, you see the senators were in position with the state. We have 2 senators, right? And all the representatives of all the districts in the state would all get together. And they would say, you know, this is what my people want, this is what, and they would do the whole way out of all of them as a representatives to what the state movement was going to be. And then they would carry that to the senator, the representatives, and say to the senator, this is what the people say they want. This is the and they had their right, though. I mean, if they were the representative, like, I don't agree with everybody, I'm on the opposite side, but, you know, this is what everybody wants, so I'm telling you this is the way they want you to vote. And the senator would go to Washington and vote by the will of the people, not by that of his own will. That's what it was intended to be. They represent the people. They're elected by the people to represent the people, not that of their own will. We've lost sight of this. Today, the majority of people I speak to are ignorant fools. And, you know, people say, well, he's not a politician, and that guy's not a politician. What is a politician? Does anybody know what a politician is? Let me tell you what a politician is. A politician is nothing of any authority or power whatsoever. A politician is a representative of that of a people who elected them. All he is a poly reflection of that of the will of something else. He represents that. He's a politician. Doesn't mean he's smart. You don't even need to be smart to be a senator or representative. All you got to do is be able to retain what people tell you enough to be able to reflect what they said. You don't have to have high intelligence. You don't have to have a degree in political science. You don't have any of that. Because you know what? You're really just a representative. You're just going and saying, this is what the people told me they want. That's all you're doing. That's your job. That's it. When there's a law coming through or there's a change in the statutes coming through and the people review that and they tell the representative, hey, I don't like that statute, and all of a sudden everybody's like, I don't like that statute. The representative goes and informs the governor, people don't like that statute. They say, don't sign that statute. Veto that statute. They don't want it. And then the governor, too, he represents the people. He has to take the will of what's passed on to him by the representatives and the senators. He doesn't get to act upon his own will under that of self-proclaimed authorities as if he's the dictator and the power of authority over the will of the people. He's there to exercise the will of the people. And this goes up the whole chain right up to the president. And then that gets to the next point of the law. Is the government the authority over our military? No, they're not. No, they're not. And this is the most important part of this whole long speech I'm going to say. The government, the president, the governors, the mayors, they are not the authority over the government's police or the military. Because you know what? All of the military and the policing authorities in this nation took an oath to the Constitution. And the first three words of that Constitution is we the people. Whenever the government, when we see what happened, and that's what's a disgrace with right now with Donald Trump, and I have to say we have to face this reality. Donald Trump attempted to use that of the American military to defend that of what he declared himself a criminal establishment, which was trying to coup the authority of the people. He used our own military to protect them. And our military went along with it, which shows you the ignorance of them. With our military heads and the governors of state who issued their National Guard to go out and do this, they acted in treason. They were complicit in aiding and assisting that of treason because they have no authority or consented powers to even sig that of the American military or National Guard on its own people. Their oath is to the people, not the government. And every head of the National Guard and the military, if such an order comes, has the right to inform whatever idiot of government is trying to tell them to take up arms against the American people. Those heads of those military branches and that of that authority of policing power has the power and consented to them by the people to inform that person, no, my oath is to we the people, not we the government. And at that point, that official has the right to raise a rhetoric to the people of awareness to let them know that this government, this person of government, is acting outside the consented to powers. Now we have the constitutional officers, the sheriff should be addressing these issues when they see this happening with counties. And we also have that of the military itself. The official military of our military should have the authority and power when they see governors acting outside this consented to power and trying to abuse the power to these levels. So understand, Donald Trump didn't only fail us. Our military commanders of the highest positions failed us. And our governors failed us that took part in this. We are in a very dangerous state right now in this country. And right now this nation is at great threat of falling. And our world enemies are watching. Understand, people, we're 244 years new in this world. And we're up against totalitarian regimes, elitist dictators, and supreme rulers that have been in power for thousands of years. And the handwriting's on the wall. If we don't wake up as the American people and take our place, if we don't stand up and show that we are still in control and have the authority in this nation, because it's clear, Donald Trump should have handed over and allowed the military to coup this nation, rip this government down, and gave us the ability to start again from scratch with just our Constitution. That's what needed to be done in this nation. That's what really needed to be done in this nation, because we have gone too far out of control. The corruption, the abuse is too far out of control. And in the current times, the threat to our very safety and general welfare of the American people is greatly, greatly out of control by that of too much foreign interest being actually infiltrated into our own country and our own government right now that has ill intent and will to want to kill the American people. Can you believe this? This is a fact. I'm telling you, it's not an assumption of mine or there is actually foreign interest government of foreign governments who are our known and declared enemies, who have the will and desire openly and stated to kill the American people, who are now, right now, holding elected powerful positions not only within our federal government of the House of Congress, but as well across our nation within many positions as mayors, police, officers, and in our military, who have sworn an allegiance to that of their own foreign interest ideology to kill us, acting under the authority of the color of our laws in our own nation. And our political establishment has allowed this, condoned this, and has defended this, and aided and assisted in making this possible. Now, if that doesn't tell you we have a serious problem in this country, and if that doesn't explain to you clearly why we need to restructure, and why we the people need to take our position of authority and power, and our right, in exercising our right, is what the Declaration of Independence gives us the right to alter, amend, or abolish the system of government and to institute new government on which we feel best secures our safety and happiness and that of our posterity going forward. We have that right. That's the law of this nation. We're the consenting power of the law of this land by that of the Constitution, of which even consents to this government, of which they're restricted by. We are the only authority and power that has the right to amend, alter, or abolish that law. And if we fail to take our place of authority and our military fails to support us in it, we're in trouble, people. We're on our way down. But to the military heads, I got to say, and to the policing authorities, I got to say, where are you? Where are you? I understand that more than likely, when we look at the last generation, the last 25 years, and the dumbing down of this nation, a lot of those in power of our police and our authorities with state police and local police and even the sheriffs are totally unaware. They've never even read the Constitution. They don't even understand a goddamn thing I'm saying. That's sad. But I would have to say to each and every one of you, you can redeem yourself now. You have internet, you have access, you have far more greater access to knowledge and wisdom than I ever had, because I had to hard learn it in books and libraries, trekking books up and down for freaking years. You can access this on the keyboard, and you can read, and you can get the basic understanding to understand everything I'm saying is the truth. Your oath to the Constitution is not to this government. That Constitution starts in the first three words is we the people. This used to be basics taught in civics. I know even back when I did start going to school in high school, they had civics. Today they don't have civics. It's pretty clear they don't have civics because these kids today, the posterity has no idea of anything about our Constitution, our nation, or the founding principles, or the morals and values of being an American. It's disgraceful. And I'll tell you what, to all of you posterity who feel this nation is so ugly, it's because of your lack of understanding who we are as an American that makes it so goddamn ugly. If you knew the true principles and values of that of being a real American, you would find out we are the greatest nation in the world that ever existed in this world, and all of what we know of the last 15,000 years of written history. No great people of this world has ever risen like the American people, and there's never been such a great nation as the Americas of these United States of America. Never. We are the innovators of all technology of what's advanced to today. We are the opening of what made possible all that we know today, because we are the only nation that gave a pursuit to happiness unrestricted by anybody, to dream beyond the measure of what even would be possible so they could reach the impossible and make it possible. It wouldn't have been possible without America. We are the greatest nation that ever existed in this world. And if you understood the truth of that history, the truth of the morals and the values and the principles of America, you would understand why we've always been great. And America's always been great. But out of ignorance, indoctrination, foolish self-centeredness of you and your own bitterness and unwilling to be humble nature, you don't see that truth. You're a disgrace to this country. You're a disgrace to humanity in truth. And I can only hope that maybe I inspire you to seek that wisdom and that knowledge, to open your eyes and see that truth and recognize if you're an American, you are of the greatest people in the world. And that doesn't mean because you're white, red, black, or yellow. That just means because you're an American, you're a part of a one people of all equal, of a nation that has a constitution and a God-given right by the laws of nature and nature's God, that you have the right to pursuit of happiness, that unrestricted and no one can stop you, so that you can dream the impossible and pursue the path of making the impossible possible, of which has made and has established this world to what it is today. Without America, we would not be any. All of what you see and all the great advancements in technology would not exist without a free nation, of people to be able to freely think and pursue their thoughts and their patterns and that of their pursuit to make possible the impossible. Nothing of what you see today would even be possible. And you can't, in the recognizing of the truth and the fact of what I'm saying, you can't deny we are the greatest nation of the greatest people that ever rose in history. That's who we are. That's still who we are. And we can maintain that. What's ugly is our failure to remember who we are. What's ugly is our failure to recognize that of what we've accomplished. What's ugly is you, this generation, that is so lazy, so self-serving, and so ungrateful that you won't even take the time to learn the truth. That's disgraceful. But that's what I had to say, people. That's what I got to say. That's what a common, just everyday American guy like me's got to say. And below is a comment box. Let's talk about it. But one thing I think we need to do right now, we need to develop a new department, one in where we the people have control. And my vision for the last 10 years has been the United States Citizens Department of Government Control. That's what I want to start. And that's what I want to initiate. I have a plan, I have an idea of how it can be initiated and how it can rapidly be placed across this country with that of true American patriotism, and how we can have the authoritarian positions of it with that of the state and local policing and that of even our military, in ensuring the people's power is retained, and as well that things are pursued in a right course of integrity that ensures that the true intent of our Constitution and our founding principles are secured and maintained with integrity forward for our posterity. I have that vision. I believe that it's possible. I know it's possible. I have it here. And I've envisioned it and I've reasoned with it over the last 10 years. And all I need, though, is a collective people with me to make it possible to be real. To make and once we establish this department, we can restructure our government. We can fix the problems that we're facing, and we can get ourselves back on track to where we need to be. But most importantly, we will reflect to the world's totalitarian regimes around us that we, the people, are still in control and don't think of breaching our borders and trying to overthrow us. Because once we establish our department, we can again establish our presence in the world as who we are as a people. And we can pursue that again of hopefully reestablishing our alliance with that of our world allies, who are in pursuit of that of the very same morals, values, and principles as we had as Americans. Because right now is very dangerous. Believe me, our world enemies are watching, and they're preparing. And I would say again, and I said this many times, I'm going to tell you right now to all the youth of this country, and all of those of the ignorant Americans that seem to be like looking at me thinking they don't have a clue what I'm talking about. I would just refer you to look back on a reflection of 1978 Iran. If you're not aware, Iran used to be our ally. They were called Mini America in 1977. They were overthrown by the totalitarian Islamic Muslims in 1978. That's when they became our enemies. And if you want to see what's going to happen to America if we don't wake up and face the reality and take our position in place as the American people, you just look at what happened to Iran in 1978, because that's what's coming for America if we don't take our place. With that said, I'm going to leave everybody off. I hope anybody who watched my video enjoyed it. If you want to comment below, you want to debate about it, you want to talk about it, you want to reach out to me and help me, and you want to hear this idea I have for the United States Citizens Department of Government Control, and you want to help me make that vision real, contact me. Contact me on here. I'll provide my number. We can talk. I'm willing to take whatever out of my own life to make this possible, because I care about my grandkids and my children. I care about the American posterity, and I want to see America preserved for what it was founded to be. So let's do this. Let's do this. We have real solutions. We have real ability. And I'm telling you, by the very thing they're using the law, we have this law right here on our side. This is the law of the nation. This is the establishing law that made this nation possible. And anything upon other than this law is secondary to this law. This is the very law that consents to a constitution and the forming of a government. And we are the authority of this law. This is our law. We are the authority and the heads of this law of this nation. That which we entrust on as the government through our Constitution It's not an authority over us. We are the authority over them, is what it states very clear, right in our own Declaration of Independence, that we are a nation instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We are the governed, and we consent to those who govern us. They're not self-endowed by their powers. All their powers and authority are given by our consent to them. They're there to serve us, not rule over us and dictate us. And even right now, what we're seeing, millions of Americans being affected right now by some of the current president's orders with Joe Biden and the pipeline. You know, this government is not empowered, nor does it have the consented power by we the people anywhere in the Constitution that allows them to infringe the right of free trade. And by allowing this, they're just positioning us further to infringe upon things to set us up for a socialist state. People, we got to wake up and realize what's going on here. Because they're doing it blatantly right now in front of everybody's face. He's acting way outside of the consent to authorities and infringing upon the right of free trade in this nation. Of which that was another good thing Donald Trump did do. You know, he ensured the integrity of that free trade and understood the position of government that it didn't have the right to infringe it. And he removed a lot of the regulations that allowed free trade to move forward, which prospered this country greatly in the last 4 years. Donald Trump did do a lot of great things. It's just a shame how in the end he cowered down and actually undid everything that he did do. And he put people in position and power to be able to undo everything he did do. And right now we're in a far greater dangerous position because, as I said, in 2016 we were still a true republic. We, the people, had the power to put into place of power as our government who we wanted and who we elected. Right now, clearly, we don't have that power anymore. These people are by their own self-appointed authorities, and powers are placing whoever they want without a care of what the hell we, the American people, think. And that's self-evident and clear. We have to face that truth. But like I said, I'm going to cut it there. Thanks everybody for watching my video. If you want to comment, again, comment below. Want to talk, you want to reach out to me. I want to do something real, something beneficial for the future of our nation, something that secures the truth for our posterity. So let's do something. Thank you all again for taking the time to watch my video if you watched it this far. And I'll see you next time I make another video, or hopefully with information about something coming to make what I'm envisioning real. Thank you again. Have a great day.